With Bobby's report, he has now identified for me 450,000 and our auditing team is more than happy to start going through those 450,000 voter registrations and people who voted to decipher which of these ballots is fraudulent. For us to certify this election at 11 a.m. this morning and allow our electors to pass the Arizona vote to Biden based on all the information presented here today is an absolute travesty without a solid investigation. Thank you very much.
Ms. Harris, I've got one question for you, and we're going to move on to the next witness. You have got a workforce that is committed to doing this. What is your estimation on how long it would take to work through a sample of, shall we say, 30% of your highest number?
It's got to get done before December 14th.
I'm very aware of that, but
so to verify that a voter doesn't exist, you actually have to go to the residence and basically, in my opinion, get a recording from the person who resides there stating that they are not alive or that that person has never lived there. You need proof that there's a murder, you need a murder weapon, and you need a witness to the murder. So we can do this in 7 days.
that's the answer I was looking for. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. God bless America.
Would you please see to it that Mayor Giuliani has your information? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, next up we have Jan Bryant. All right. Jan, would you please come to the table and have a seat, give your name, and we'll move forward. And just so we can keep this going, we also have Greg, I'm going to kill your name, man, Wadniski on deck. Thank you, Jan. If you don't mind, could you give your name and briefly why you're here? And you've got about 5 minutes to explain, okay?
So my full name is Janice Bryant, but I go by Jan. It's easier.
Thank you.
I am a retired Maricopa resident for 6 years since I retired. Before I retired, I was a senior manager at a fairly major utility, running a lot of big multi-million-dollar technology projects. So I have some experience. I have an MBA, so I'm not just an old retired lady. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. And I was this is my first election I ever volunteered for. So I'm a huge volunteer for a lot of things, but this is the first time here in any election. And some things happened. I worked at a couple of polling centers, but mostly I was at the Maricopa County Ballot Tabulation Center. And that's the stories that I want to share today that I found some issues with. And I'll tell you the biggest thing. I have no idea how this happened, but on November 10th, we were on a night shift. It was about 9:30, and I actually was watching the people doing the duplication ballots, and so they were hand entering military and overseas ballots. That happened behind a wall, so if there are any camera people shooting through the glass window, you could not see those people who were hand entering ballots. So all of that work went on behind a wall. So you walk around behind the wall. We were allowed to go back there and watch, and I did. But it just would be random if you happened to go by and something weird happened. This first incident that I had, they had a duplicate ballot, and these are printed off at a company called Runbeck, I believe, and then they bring them over and they're hand entered, and they call it the duplication process. Anyway, that ballot numbers were identical. The system does not allow for a duplicate ballot entry, so it kicked it out. I didn't really think any issue of it. I thought it was weird. There was 2 copies of the identical ballot in this stack of ballots that one Republican and one Democrat employee were entering. But I didn't record that. But then later that evening, and I said that was about 9:30, I did record this one. There was a ballot with a red vote for president, a red pen, and these are copies. There should be no red ink on any of these ballots. And so the two ladies that were entering the ballots stopped and said, "This is weird. We have there's no red marks." It was the only mark for president. It happened to be for Biden, but it didn't matter. It was an anomaly. And so why was that red ink on that ballot? I don't know. I never did find out. So that was weird. They called Scott Jarrett over, and he actually said, apparently there's a committee that reviews any ballots that can't be determined in the room at the time. So Scott said, put it aside. Well, and he walked away, and I stood there for another minute, and luckily, because the next two ballots were duplicate copies, but not red ink, just black, same mark, same vote, and the same ballot number. And so we called, I don't know why. So we called Scott back, and he took all those ballots and put them in a manila folder, so I couldn't get a ballot number or any other information, and set it aside and said, this will go to the committee tomorrow. And I did bring that up with the person that I was reporting to and said, we need to find out what happened to these ballots because this is something really unusual. So that was a very specific incident. I want to say there were a lot of small incidents, but nothing that I could say this really made me very nervous to see that happen. And then back to my opening where I wanted to tell you that I do have a pretty strong project management technology background. This is not, I would say, everybody raves about how well run and how tight this room is that we were working in. I was in the tabulation center, the glass and the servers in a glass room, and all the computers are on a single cable that you can see. None of that matters because two things. One, Dominion employees were the only ones that were running any of that equipment. So and I was in the tabulation center 6 different days, day and night shifts. And no county employees, no IT people, no one else was touching any of the software. They did all the training for the adjudicators. They ran all the reports. And so, and I brought that up on my very first day in the room. I said, this doesn't seem right. As a person with my background, never in a million years would I turn my company's most important thing over to someone else, and there's only 2 guys, and they had the whole control of everything. I also participated in the random ballot selection for hand audit, picking the ballots, determining which bin we were going to select. And even that, Dominion ran the reports for. So no one, they knew exactly what was in the hand audit boxes. That made me nervous also. And they also knew when we pulled the last box, which was probably 8 days before they quit counting ballots. So I don't know. That's all I can tell you is what I observed. I can't tell you that there was anything wrong. I just can tell you what I observed. And as a senior manager over big projects, never in a million years would I have allowed some of the stuff that I saw going on there. The other thing that I wanted to make sure, the final week that they were counting ballots, I came in, I think, on a Tuesday. When I had left the Friday before, I did not notice there was a laptop in the room behind the wall that John, one of the Dominion employees, was working on. And when I came in on that Tuesday and walked around where they were doing the hand entry of ballots, I also noticed that laptop sitting there, and John was working on it. And it's not a secure room. If you're bringing a laptop in and out of a room, who knows what happened there. And every one of the 50, potentially, desktops that were in there had a row of USB ports on the side of it. So I get very angry when I hear some of our leaders here saying, oh, it's secure, nothing can get in or out. That's not true. So I will tell you that is probably the biggest issue that I had. I will also say there were 3 rows of adjudicators. So, and you may have heard this before or seen it, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat, sitting at they call them boards, but it's a monitor, and adjudicating any issue ballots that kick out that can't be tabulated automatically. And those rows, the first few days I was in there, we were allowed to walk between the rows so we could get fairly close. They were very close together, so with COVID and everything else, it was awkward anyway, but we could walk between them, and we were all wearing masks, by the way. But anyway, when I came back in I can't tell you the day, but they were placing stickers on the floor to keep us away, so we could only see the back row of monitors and get close enough to see anything that was happening. So I would say that the reason they gave was that one of the observers had gotten too close and was actually like touching people. I do not know, I wasn't there, that's the reason I was told. But then we were not allowed the rest of the time anywhere near the rest of the monitors. So we could see the back. I don't know how many were on the back row, but we could see all those pretty clearly. But other than that, I couldn't tell you what was happening on the adjudication. Let's see. There was one more thing that wasn't on my list. They reset the tabulation machines 3 times to 0.
I beg your pardon, I didn't hear you.
Reset the tabulation machines 3 times to 0.
At what point?
Throughout, because they did not know, and this is literally what Dominion and Renee, who works for the county, told me. They didn't know what would happen after so many batches had gone through those new high-speed tabulation machines. So apparently they can take a card out and start over at 0. Now, as observers, we were recording the counts on each of those machines at the end of each shift. And then when it started over at 0, we recorded that. So it's recorded, and it wasn't hidden. But I just want to say, again, how poor of a project is this that you didn't test for how much data was going to come through, that they had no idea. So they were afraid that the machines would crash, or I don't know what they thought. They didn't know what would happen, so they zeroed them out again to start counting over. So, and I just want to say, I am retired. I'm here because, I don't want to cry, but I love my country, and I never thought in a million years I would have to be here talking about stuff like this. So.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Giuliani, do you have a question? Or two?
Mr. Chairman, this is part of the damage that's been done by this horrendous fraud on the American people, not just here in Arizona, but throughout the country. People like this, who are patriotic, decent Americans, they're trying to do an honest job, and they're in the middle of a gigantic swindle by a political party that lost its soul probably 20 years ago. So may I just ask you a few questions so that we get there? Your testimony was excellent, but I just want to get it organized a little bit better. How many days did you, how many days were you an observer?
How many days?
How many days altogether?
I was in the tabulation center 6 days altogether, 2 night shifts and 4.
So you were solely the tabulation center, not the polling place?
I was at a polling place for half shifts a couple times before that, but I didn't bring up any information.
But your testimony is about the calculation center?
Yes, the tabulation center.
And you say here on November 3rd, 2020, you observed at the Maricopa County BTC for the first time that it seemed strange that the tabulation and adjudication hardware and software were only run by Dominion employees. That meant that none of the county employees had access to them?
To the software. The people who were actually doing the adjudication and running the tabulation machines, those were temp employees or employees of the county.
But the software and the hardware was handled solely by Dominion.
There were 3 total employees, 2 mostly was.
Were you led to understand that there should be no internet communication with that room to the outside world?
Yes, they even pointed out that the servers are only plugged into the electrical outlet. There's no internet. But if you bring a laptop in, all bets are off. So,
of course, during the course of this hearing, we've seen, I would imagine, millions of communications out of that center and back into that center. So whoever told you that was just lying completely.
And they said a lot. I mean, that's like they're...
But to support that, you did see a computer. How many did you see? How many computers did you see?
Total computers in the room? Probably 50 to 60.
And they wanted you to believe that they weren't communicating with anything?
They were supposedly
playing games?
Hardwired to the server and no other access was what we were told. So, but the laptop, I don't know because I did not, didn't get close enough to see what was going on there.
Did, when they were doing adjudications would be the ballots that were put aside because there was something questionable about them, correct?
Adjudication, the tabulation machine kicks it out because a lot of times it's just a write-in candidate, which is totally legitimate, or stray marks on the ballot that made it or overvotes. So they voted for 2 candidates where there was only 1. So all of those things kick out. And they told me that 1 in 8 ballots kicks out for adjudication.
1 in 8?
1 in 8, yes.
1 in 8 ballots. And when they were examined, were you able to observe the examination?
The adjudicators, that's the part where I could see the back row. They did not have hard copies of the ballot. It was fully up on the screen. And all they were doing was determining why the tabulation system kicked out the ballot and then trying to make a decision based on what the voter intended. So they tried not to throw ballots out if they could understand.
Was there a Republican present to listen to that?
Each board had 1 Republican and 1 Democrat. That's what they told us. So
well, when you say that's what they told us, what does that mean?
I will tell you, on the last few days, they pulled in a whole bunch of employees to be the Republican, or you could be an independent also. So
when you say they pulled in a whole group of employees to be Republicans, you mean they were county or
they were
county employees who
yeah.
they said were Republican?
Or independent. I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Or independents.
You had to have 2 parties, and it could be 2 of the 3. So either independent/libertarian, or Republican, or Democrat. So 2 of the 3.
And why are you in doubt that they were actually Republicans?
Because I was in the room a lot, and everyone in there, not everyone, but I will tell you that a high percentage of the employees in that room were Democrat. And I will tell you that I walked out with one of the adjudicators, a temp employee. She was very upset because she was the Republican adjudicator, and she said she heard a lot of people cheering every Biden vote, and people who worked there. So she was upset when we were walking out, and I said, you need to tell whoever you're working for. I don't know what to tell you to do at that point.
Did they have Republican identification of some kind?
They wear a lanyard, red, blue, or yellow.
But you doubted that they were Republicans?
I doubt those last few days that those were truly independents.
And what about verification of signatures? Did you get a chance to observe that?
I did not watch the signature, but there are some people behind me that did.
Pardon me?
There are people coming in the room next that did work to see the signature.
And when you say you as a project manager, you were shocked, can you just elaborate just a little bit?
This is the most important thing going on in the country right now, and this whole thing is run more sloppy than any project I've seen. I just can't believe that this is how we run elections. I just can't. And that we sign off on this. I mean, has it always been like this? Like I said, this is my first time, and I'm very disillusioned. I just don't understand.
Did you detect a bias in it? A bias?
I didn't personally, but they knew who I was. So
Pardon me?
They knew I was the Republican official observer.
No,
so.
I mean a bias in the way in which they were doing it.
In the way? No, I can't say that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. I believe, did somebody raise their hand? Yes. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am, you spoke earlier about, you said that the tabulation machines were set 3 times over a period, if that was one evening or over the period, over the whole period. You said that it was recorded. That's good. Do you have any inclination as to why that could be problematic?
The only thing is when you start over it, I mean, they're keeping track of how many ballots are running through each machine, and so they're getting reset to 0. They all were reset at the same time, so it all happened on the same day, on the same shift. So what was problematic was that shows me that they did not have a tested system in there, because they literally told me they didn't know what would happen if it went over 1,000 batches on any machine. So that rather than have that happen and not know what was going to happen with the ballots or the tabulation or anything, they just started over.
And they specifically used that term, they didn't know what would happen if it went over 1,000 batches?
Batches, I think they call, that doesn't seem like the right name, but I'm losing the name right now, but 1,000 somethings going through there, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Cook.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman, to that point. So how can I feel comfortable with, and what I've just heard you say and my colleague talk about? So if I get this right, they ran 1,000 batches, vote totals come up for one party or the other. Now, I don't want to get into that, but vote totals come up for one party or the other or candidates. What I heard you say is, so you document what those votes are, or they...
We documented the number of ballots that had gone through that machine each shift. And so we had a number that was incrementally going up every shift. And then...
Okay, so then they go to 0. So is that information is put over here for what that batch is?
I don't know what happened to the original.
So so what I'm trying to get to is, how can I feel comfortable that, are there 10 batches? Are there 9 batches? Were there 15 batches and only 9 batches counted? And I go back to what I have seen is when they were doing an audit in another state and the woman had her video recorder on and everybody knew it and said, well, how many batches are there? Well, we thought we were through, but we have 6 or 8 more boxes of batches we can't find. And that's what I'm trying to get to here in Arizona. How do we know that that wasn't the case there? Can you give me some assurance? Because I would really like to have some.
I can't, and I don't know who could, but I will tell you what you just said triggered another thought. The Wednesday before the Friday that we quit voting, so 10 days before they quit tabulating, they thought they were done. And then more truckloads of ballots would come in, and I'm like, how can you not know how many ballots are still out there?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. Would you repeat that?
Yeah.
They thought they were done, and then there was what?
Multiple times, the people that were running the rooms thought they were done or almost done or were going to be done Wednesday morning, then Thursday morning, then Friday morning. Then it went on the whole next week. And I'm like, I asked the question, I'm like, you don't know how many ballots are still left to come in? So I don't know. I don't know who does, again, process project management.
On that,
Zero.
On that point, ma'am, I'm tracking with you, but what day did the truck show up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, because what I heard the first time, what I thought I heard is a truckload of ballots showed up.
Okay, just a minute. I want to make sure that we capture this properly. So there were trucks that showed up on the 3rd, and then the 4th, and then the 5th. And how long did that go on? How many days?
I wasn't there the whole last week, but I know.
For as long as you can recall, how many days?
My last day was the 10th, and they were still coming in.
Trucks?
Coming from a company called Runback that does the high-speed scanning and printing of duplications and I think the military ballots. So now I'm getting out of my comfort level here talking about this. I don't know what they're doing, but those ballots were coming in from a high-speed scanning company called Runback that apparently you haven't heard of Runback?
No, I've heard of Runback, okay. Ma'am, but what I'm trying to figure out is whether they printed them or they scanned them, and if they scanned them off-site, to what purpose?
I can't tell you.
Because wasn't that your job to scan them? Well, I think not your job, but...
Yeah. No, all the high-speed scanning happens at Runback. So those ballots go to Runback. As far as I know, there were no observers there. I don't know. I never got called to work at Runback. That's all I can tell you.
Okay. With all due respect, Mr. Cook, now we've opened up a whole new can of worms.
Yeah. And again,
so
I don't know enough about it to be the witness.
No, that's fine. Your observation is useful here. So what you're telling me, I'm going to play this back to you a second. The scanning wasn't actually done on site at a Maricopa County structure. It was done someplace else.
Where they have very high-speed scanners, yeah.
Well, right now, I really don't care what the speed is. I want to know, were they Dominion scanners? Or they were?
No, I don't think it has anything to do with Dominion.
So I'm trying to understand, what was the purpose of scanning them in advance of them being tabulated on the Dominion equipment?
They were duplications, the ballots that wouldn't read through the tabulation machines. They were ballots that came in from military and overseas. But there were more ballots than that. So I don't know where the rest of them were coming from, because they kept bringing trays of them in. So I don't know where they were coming from. That's a question for the county employees to explain to you where those ballots came from that whole next week. I don't know where they came from.
Mr. Cook, are you done?
He left.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Cook. Mr. Giuliani.
So you were there from the 3rd until the 10th?
Yes.
Okay, so 7 days later, ballots were still coming in. And were those ballots counted?
Yeah, I watched them go
Did you observe them being counted?
I watched them go through the tabulation machines, and I watched people working on the adjudication of those.
And how many ballots?
Oh, I don't know.
What was the largest number you saw in any one day?
Oh, man.
No, just a guess. How many cartons?
Okay, there was, and I wasn't there, there was usually 2 or 3 shifts, so I want to say one day they thought 90,000 was a good number.
So
for a
one day
shift.
was...
For a shift, and if they were running multiple shifts.
And which day was that? One of the middle days, one of the end days?
It was in the middle, probably.
Somewhere in the middle between the 3rd and the 10th?
Yeah.
90,000?
Yeah.
And then other days it was approximately the same, or?
Some were less, some were more. So some days when they had the 3 shifts, well, they never had 3 shifts tabulating. Sorry, they just would run.
Sure, no, that's okay. You're
they
doing
would
the
run
best
a
you can.
long tabulation shift.
What was the lowest number, you think?
There were some days when maybe there was only 15,000. Boy, please
15?
do not hold me to these numbers because I.
Was that toward the end?
No, that would have been earlier.
To the beginning?
Yeah.
In other words, there were more ballots at the end than the beginning?
There were ballots. They were backing up, was what I would say. They're
And what
not
about...
not more coming into the building necessarily, but there's a room that we could see with rows and rows of bins of
These were
ballots.
coming in a different way?
Yes, I don't know.
They're coming in the back door?
Some come from the mailbox or from the postal service. They all go through a couple of, they get the signature verified, then they get separated from the envelope, and then they end up somehow in the room that I was
So
in.
if I understand this correctly, ballots were coming in 2 different ways?
At least, yeah, from the post
Front door,
office.
back door?
Well, I think they were all the back door.
Oh, they were all the back door?
All the back door. None came in the front door.
But this group was 15,000 for a low, 90,000 for a high, and then those last couple of days when you were there, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th, how many?
It was pretty average. They were still running full-time.
Like 90,000?
Long shifts. Yeah, probably 70 to 80 maybe.
Wow. Anybody explain them?
Explain.
Did anybody explain what they were?
I did not ask every time. I asked a few times, so I understand some of them, but.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Allen, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bryant, I'm curious, why did the county, on the last day was the last day, brought in county employees to take part of being part of the observers? Why did they?
They weren't observing; they were actually adjudicating. So they
Oh,
were doing-
adjudicating.
yes,
Okay.
And I think they just needed all hands on deck. So I mean, that was the intent, was to get the work done, finish counting, because they kept thinking they were done. And they weren't.
Well, because I heard that then, because I was thinking that you were saying they were to make up for the lack of not having Republican there. So were we short of having volunteers to go in and observe in Maricopa?
I don't believe so. There was always at least 2 of us in the tabulation center, and at least one in one of the other rooms, the signature verification. What the employees were doing was the adjudication work, which also requires 2 different parties to adjudicate each ballot. So you had to have at least 2 of the 3 parties to do that. So that's what the county employees were doing at the end. They brought them on just to help the backlog.
Well, that's what I was thinking, Mr. Chairman, because I was thinking we should have called in more of the party workers then to come in and help rather than do that. But that's
Well,
fine. You clarified it for me.
We didn't call anybody in. That's, I think, the joy of this hearing. Every single one of these individuals has stepped forward of their own volition. And I to be honest with you, I'm mortified to hear what's coming out of your mouth, but I am so delighted that you have had the courage to come in here. Very too few people. Representative Roberts, just keep in mind, we still have got a dozen witnesses to hear, and it's 3:30. So.
Sorry, they're all really important.
I just wanted to revisit what you were saying as far as you got to a point where they continued to say that they didn't know where these trucks of ballots were coming from.
They didn't. It's not that they didn't know. It's that they didn't know how many were still coming.
Okay. I assume at this point in time these were not early ballots in any way, shape, or form. I'm just kind of curious, while we've been discussing this, did anything stand out to you as far as these new ballots that they didn't know where they were coming from, as far as a physical appearance in any way? No. Okay.
Everything, it just looked like ballots just kept coming.
Okay.
They all looked the same. They all came in the same bins. So.
One quick question.
Senator Borelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am, just one real quick question. I'm sorry I was out. I don't know if it was addressed yet. But during the adjudication process where they were on the duplications, you said you were there observing. Was there a Republican and a Democrat sitting there literally making the corrections?
Yes. So one was running the mouse on the computer. One was running the computer mouse, and the other one was logging anything they changed by hand. So, and then at the end of their shift, I will tell you that this process, of all the things I saw, was probably the cleanest. So at the end of their shift, they got a report of everything they changed on the computer, and they had to go through their hand log, and they had to both agree that everything they did was what they said they were going to do.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Next we have Greg Wadniski, and up on deck is Les Menkes. Greg, I'm very sorry for butchering your name, man, but if you would, could you properly pronounce it?
Yeah.
Give us just 10 seconds of what you plan to tell us, and if you could, keep it within 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me here today. My name is Greg Wadinski. I'm obviously an American citizen and a resident of Maricopa County. I want to talk to you a little bit about what I observed as a certified poll observer, election observer down at the Maricopa County MTech facility, the tabulation center as it's referred to. I'm going to refer to some of my notes, but in short, what I'd like to talk about is comments that were made to me by a Dominion employee around chain of custody and what I would discuss or describe as the ability of fluidity or porous administration on the system. As I mentioned, I was an observer at MTech on 10/24, and then again a week later on Sunday 11/1 before Election Day. I spent approximately 8 or 9 hours on site at the MTech facility. I obviously had the paperwork to be there, was badged, and I had the ability to move about the MTech tabulation room. I was in the area where they were doing adjudication work, and then later on the Sunday the 11th, Sunday the 1st, they were also doing ballot feeding and tabulation. What I observed in there was the Dominion computer system in what's described as a caged glassed area. There were several Canon scanners in there, as well as what I'd call 2 rather large bulk ballot processing machines, which are essentially OCR, optical code recognition scanners. I interacted with several supervisors. I will not mention their names here today, most of which were just by first name basis, and that was either inside or outside that room. What's most important is I had an opportunity to speak to a gentleman whose name I will not mention here, by all I know is his first name, but he identified himself as a Dominion employee on contract to Maricopa County for the election, and I observed him and another Dominion employee who I would say was in the capacity, as they described to me, as systems administration roles, and they demonstrated competence and knowledge around systems, access to the system, as well as the administration of that system. They were there to help the workers as well as the volunteer poll, not the volunteer, but paid poll workers to do the adjudication process, as well as any issues that may have occurred with the tabulation machines. What I observed was that the machines were optically reading the mail-in ballots, converting the paper ballots into an electronic image, and discerning the voter tabulation data into an electronic format. So think of that as an image, like a JPEG, a picture, as well as some sort of tally or calculation. I don't have intimate knowledge of the inside workings of the system. And then I also spent a day on November 5th in the signature room, but I will not discuss any of that today, but for the record. So on Sunday, November 1st, in the adjudication tabulation scanning room and in witness with other observer, who is here to testify today as well, as my witness, I spoke to this gentleman from Dominion and asked questions on the computer systems contained in the room and contained within that caged area connected to the ballot scanners, the OCR readers. It was my understanding from staff as well as the employees that we were processing mail-in ballots, obviously, and that those tabulations were being fed into the computer system within that room, and there was an assurity that there seemed to be a level of physical as well as network security based on the arrangement of those computer systems. On that day, I asked the gentleman how the tabulation data and scanned images were being stored and backed up. It's common practice in computer system IT administration to do regular disk backups or system backups in the event that some sort of failure occurs to that system. The gentleman stated that he would perform a manual daily backup of the system to an external hard drive attached to and within the secured computer bay glass cage as I described. The hard drive was in a rubberized orange case and easily visible. He pointed to it and identified it. I asked what software program he was using to perform the backups. He stated he was not using an automated backup, but inferred that he was doing a simple manual copy of data to this orange disk, as I'm referring to it here in my statement. Then he said he took and made a second copy of that backup, of that orange backup, and then he reached over to his cubicle area and demonstrated a new box of hard drives that were contained in there, and he was saying that he was making a second copy of that data onto one of those fresh hard drives. That then led me to ask him a common question, which was, is there a chain of custody, and where does that drive go? He was a little bit vague in his answer, but he said that there was not a chain of custody, and that the copy that he was making daily of the master backup was being taken off-site to another facility, and he was unclear to me how it was, but when I asked him if it was getting serialized or in any way secured, he could not confirm that and basically said there was no chain of custody. I found that alarming. So later that day, on that Sunday, I then again, the same gentleman, observed him having a discussion with some of the staff and others, and I was able to walk about the room somewhat, and I came upon their conversation. And I overheard what he was talking about was, it sounded like he was trying to resolve a problem within the system that perhaps was slowing down the way the system was performing, considering that about 12% of the ballots that were being read at that point were going to what's called adjudication. So we're talking about tens of thousands of ballots a day. And they were very concerned about getting those ballots processed in a timely fashion, as you could imagine. So what he described to me was that he was having to take some of the scanned data and from what was an ever-growing large data file, so to speak, on the Dominion system with its storage, and break that larger file into small files so that he could then point those smaller files to the adjudication stations so for more efficient processing. That sounded like a manual and complex task to be taking something that's ever growing, and I asked him, I said, that sounds like a bit of work. At any rate, what I discerned from that conversation was that by doing so, he was able to get some of that processing moving a little bit quicker, and it sounded like they were obviously trying to deal with the situation at hand. But what concerned me about that, and again, I'm only observing, was that it showed to me the fluidity and the porous nature of the access that the administrator had to tabulated ballot data. And that there was the possibility of that human intervention in the process creating a potential or non-intentional error or the potential for lost data or lost files. And that's what I observed on that day. When I left the facility later that day, I obviously reported some of my concerns, and then, of course, I'm here today to let you know what I saw.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Giuliani, do you have a question? Or two?
Sir, so what, can you help us a bit in what does that all lead you to, at least hypothetically, conclude?
Well, I think my biggest concern would be that we've been hearing from election officials and others that...
Could you get just a little closer?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We've been hearing from election officials and others about the sanctity and the security of this system. We've been hearing things about networks and data coming and going. And one of the most, I guess, basic premises of any kind of security would be physical security. And by having that disk drive copied and then shuffled off the premises, presumably, by this gentleman's statement, without a chain of custody, that's no different than ballots in a box, read or unread, coming and going without any supervision.
So this Dominion employee took these with him, could have taken them anywhere, and could have done anything with them that he wanted.
There's the potential for that, or have given it to another individual to courier it to whatever facility they were allegedly storing it at. So he was vague on those details. Perhaps he didn't know, but his job was to make that copy.
So why is there a chain of custody?
I would imagine there's a chain of custody so that we can prove that the data has not changed and it arrived at its intended destination unhandled and manhandled or any kind of malicious activity performed on it.
And this was a Dominion employee who did this?
That's correct.
And did any of the county officials try to stop him, try to interfere with him?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, he openly talked about what he had to do when I asked him the question on the backups. So I would presume that he was performing a function that he deemed necessary to make sure that there was some data backup copies made, but I can't attest to why the county or the other employees there or how they would have managed that process, other than the fact that he did indicate that it left the facility.
Did he indicate he was taking them with him, either home or somewhere else, to do something with them? Was there a purpose to it?
I did not hear him make any mention of that. My concern was, where did it go? And he inferred that he thought it might be going to another facility uptown.
He thought it might be?
Yes.
He didn't know where it was going to go?
Well, that's his words. I don't know if he actually knew. I can't read his thoughts, but my point is that his answers seemed a little bit vague and perhaps honest, but nonetheless.
His name was Bruce?
Yes.
You don't know his second name?
I don't.
How old was he?
I would say he was probably in his mid-40s at the oldest, about 200 pounds, 5'8", 5'9".
And when you asked him what he was doing, he said he was bringing them uptown?
He said that the copy of the backup drive was being taken off-site, which is not an uncommon practice to have an on-site and an off-site backup copy. But when I asked him how it was getting there, how it was being transported, if it was being secured, and where it was landing, with some assurity that it got there, he said there was no chain of custody.
But he said nothing else about where he was taking it, what was going to be done with it, or anything like that?
No, again, implying the normal nature of what an administrator would do for backup, he probably was intending for it to be secured safely in the event that it was needed for some sort of restoration process.
How often did this occur? One time?
He told me that he was doing this daily.
So every night he would take out the drive with him?
He would make a copy to the main, what he called the orange drive in the cage in the secured area, and then make a second copy for this off-site copy, which would then allegedly move out of the MTech facility to some unknown destination.
And when you objected to it, what happened?
I guess I really didn't overreact. I was there as an observer, and I guess it wasn't my question, you know, I didn't feel it was my position to get confrontational about it, and I just quietly made my observations and duly noted them to the proper authorities.
Is there anything else you noted about the facility?
I would say that, you know, I've seen some publications around the county's installation of the facility and the idea that it provides a level of transparency to the community. It's visible if you have access to the building, the server's visible. My concerns, though, would be that I can't say with, you know, because I just don't know whether or not by just looking at that facility and looking at the way the servers were secured, whether or not anyone else had particular access. I mean, there were many workers in that area, including the Dominion administrators. There was, you know, at any given time, 15, maybe even more than 20 people working on adjudication in there, as well as the staff from the county. So
when they were taking the copy, making the copy, did they do any data checks before removing the drives so they could compare it when it came back?
My question to the employee and his answer didn't include any speculation around that.
Did you see that happen?
No, I did not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, you mentioned earlier that you said that you reported your concerns after this all took place. Who exactly did you report your concerns to?
The Observer program, I was told to go online and make a report. And then later on, when I was reached by the coordinator for that, they asked me if I would make a declaration, which is why I'm here today.
Do you know if this information, as far as the lack of chain of custody, because I understand that from your explanation, this orange hard drive would be like essentially the entire electorate's votes that's kept in there. To your knowledge, was this ever, the report of lack of chain of custody ever given to the Attorney General's Election Integrity Unit?
Not to my knowledge and not through me.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate your time. Next up, we have Les Minkus, a poll observer, and Diane Sarah is on deck. Good afternoon, Mr. Minkus. If you would, could you please give your full name and go right ahead into your testimony, please?
My name is Leslie Minkus, and as a veteran poll watcher and observer of the 2016, 2018, and 2020 elections, I'm here to testify to what I encountered in the 2020 election as voting irregularities, inequities, lack of transparency, and contested voter results. I'm also here as a veteran, a military veteran, and wish to extend my sincere appreciation to all of our military men and women that serve to keep the United States of America a free constitutional republic, a nation of constitutional laws, checks and balances. And I salute our flag. And to all of our military branches, I say, Semper Fi, always faithful. My professional bio includes 50-plus years in corporate life as Vice President of Finance, CFO, Legal Liaison Officer for worldwide companies and joint venture operations, where I traveled to 28 countries over 13 years, responsible for financial operations, mergers and acquisitions, audits that were both general audits and forensic audits, banking, tax, and legal relationships with barristers, solicitors, and attorneys internationally. Following is my declaration, as well as a copy of my poll observer authorization form, which I brought with me to show you that I was legally responsible as a poll worker, that I was required to present to poll inspectors at each of the poll locations where I was assigned to observe. Also, I have a picture of the Barr Elementary School gymnasium that was a polling location where I served on November the 3rd. The picture is to demonstrate the enormous size of the facility for only one Republican poll observer to watch the voting activity from an assigned seat at the entrance of the gym and not be able to see any of the ballots or the actual processing that was located at the opposite end of the gym. Everybody knows what a school gym looks like, but I thought I'd bring a picture just to make certain that you got it. I served as an official legal observer for the 2020 general election at two different locations. On October 27th, October 29th, I was at the United Methodist Church in Sun Lakes, Arizona. On November 3rd, from 5:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. at the Barr Elementary School in Phoenix, and then from 4 o'clock to 7:15 at the Sun Lakes Methodist Church in Sun Lakes, Arizona. While serving as an observer, I personally witnessed the following. Observers were not allowed to talk with poll workers or voters, which was part of the manual that the Secretary of State had put out, which was clear, nor was I able to freely walk around the poll location to observe any of the voting activities, which was contrary to what was in the Secretary of State's manual, indicating that we should be allowed to have access to all areas of the voting to be able to observe them. At the Sun Lakes location, I was seated about 25 feet away from the tabulating machine and the ballot box, the ballot drop box, and I had to ask the poll inspector and had to be accompanied by a poll worker if I wanted to walk around to observe anything anywhere in the polling locations. In the Barr Elementary School, I was seated about 80 feet from the two tabulator machines and the ballot drop box, and I had to ask the poll inspector, who was at the opposite end of the gymnasium, and I only saw her maybe twice during the time I was there, from 5:30 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If I wanted to walk around and I had to be accompanied by a poll worker to observe anything anywhere in the poll location. It appeared to me that almost every ballot, from what I was able to see, that was processed through the tabulator computer resulted in a green light switch being activated, and either the poll worker or the voter had to depress that green light switch for their ballot to process through the tabulator. Okay, so I also was on October 16th, I was also an observer that I went to the Maricopa County Election Center. That was the week after the early voting had started. And I asked to observe the ballot opening. I was asked to observe the ballot opening, sorting, and processing in the center. A point regarding lack of transparency at this facility includes observers were told how the ballot receiving process was supposed to function, but was not shown or allowed to see the mail receiving room operations. The methods used to support the supporting of the various types of ballots, how the various types of ballots were opened and distributed to processors, what the processors did with the various types of ballots, and the security of knowing that all valid ballots reach the tabulating room so that each legal vote was actually counted. While I was an observer there at the facility, where the ballots were received, validated, processed, in the large room that was there that I was seated in, I was about 25 feet away from the closest table where there was supposed to be a Republican and a Democrat sitting at the table, but who knew? I mean, nobody knew who was actually at the table because you couldn't see any credentials for anybody there. The room was large enough to hold 110 ballot processors, and the closest one that I was near was 25 feet away, so I wasn't able to really see much of anything. I was not allowed to talk to or ask any questions of anyone other than the assistant director of the facility, which I saw maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the entire day that I was there from 9 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. There was a young Asian in the facility talking with the assistant manager at the same time that I was out in the corridor that I briefly met and asked him what his role was, and he replied that he was a computer programmer at the facility. Well, I didn't think much about it until afterwards when I heard the news and I heard about the allegations that China was heavily involved with the ballot tabulating company and the software. I started to think about, gee, that's really unusual that we had an Asian gentleman that was there that was in the programming process. So I just thought it was kind of unusual, and I mentioned it in my affidavit that I had put in. Okay, finally, following the election, I was asked to come to the Arizona GOP office in order to be able to investigate some of the complaints that were coming in from voters. And I spoke with around 35 Republican voters that complained about their ballot issues of processing through the tabulating machine that they personally experienced on Election Day. Then they signed declarations under penalty of perjury that I actually went out, saw them and talked to them and asked them if they would be willing to sign those affidavits, that they had to push the green button on the tabulation machine since the poll worker told them to do so, but didn't tell them that the machine rejected their ballot and what options they had to correct their ballots by having the ballot spoiled and redoing it again. So they just thought that pushing the green button was required to process their ballot through the tabulation machine, a sign of voting irregularity and voter inequity. Thank you. That concludes my testimony today.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Minkus, when you were at the center, you noticed this green button. Can you explain to us what the green button is, and was it on every machine?
It wasn't at the center that I observed the green button. It was while I was a poll observer.
When you were a poll watcher at the voting location.
At the poll
okay,
location.
well, explain to me the green button.
The green button is a button that's labeled CAST.
CAST, C-A-S-T?
C-A-S-T. It is a triangular shaped button, and there is another button that's on the machine right next to it, which I believe is a rectangular shaped button, that was a button that was used for other issues, but it wasn't for casting the ballot. If they wanted to reject the ballot, they pushed the rectangular button and they would reject the ballot. So, as I understand it, the reason that the green light would show up is because the machine wasn't accepting the ballot. There was some issue with the ballot. Now, whether there was a smudge, whether there was an improper mark someplace, whether there was an overvote, an undervote, or whatever it may have been, it had rejected the ballot. But I had observed from the distance that I was at that so many times that green button, that green triangular button had to be pushed, that it seemed to me like it was almost a requirement that they had to do that in order to be able to put a ballot through.
And in fact, what happened when you pressed the green button?
Well, the green button did accept the ballot. It pushed it through, but it put the ballot then into a drawer which they noted as drawer number 3, which separated that from the ballots that were accepted, which went into drawer number 1 and number 2. So all those ballots that went in number 3, I don't know what happened to them.
Were they put aside for further inspection?
I don't know, because these ballots then were all taken. This was on election day, naturally, that this became an issue. And all these ballots then were, at the end of the day, taken out of the machines. They were put into box or boxes.
Special boxes just for them? For number 3?
I don't know if the drawer number 3 went into a special box, because I wasn't able to observe that.
I see.
And get close enough to see that. But I know that the ballots then were all supposed to be taken to another location where there was a central location in the East Valley in Arizona, where they were going to be picked up by a white panel truck. And again, I did not follow that because the inspector, who was a Republican, indicated that she was going along with it and she was going to follow it. But I do understand that during the time that I served as a poll inspector in the early election period, that there were times during the day, usually it was like about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, where a truck would come, a van type truck, a panel truck, would come to the poll location. There were 2 representatives that would come in that had name tags on them. They would then take the ballots, and I happened to follow that out. They would take the ballots, put it into a box, a plastic box, and they would take them out to their truck. Well, in one case, I followed them out just to see what was going on, and I noticed that the truck that they had a California plate on it, so I thought that was kind of unusual, and I questioned about that, but I understand that they were renting trucks locally, so there could have been that there were enough people moving from California that were using those trucks that were here, and they wound up...
Are you referring now just to the ballots that were the subject of the green button that went into number 3?
These were just...
all the ballots?
These were all the ballots. They were ballots coming out of the ballot box and ballots that were coming from out of the machines.
And the green ballots were taken along with them?
Yes.
Okay. And now you also said that... well, how many ballots approximately do you think were cast that way, that you observed?
Well, in each day, when I was there prior to the actual election day, there were probably several hundreds to thousands of people that filed through that particular...
How many?
Several hundreds to 1,000 people that filed through that particular polling location.
Right.
Yeah. On election day, there was probably over 1,000 people that came through there.
So total of about...
a couple thousand, yes.
2,000 to 3,000 people?
Yes.
And when you were at the Maricopa County election facility, where the ballots were received, validated, and processed, you were seated 25 feet in front of a room with 110 ballot processes. Could you see anything?
No. I mean, I could see the people, I could see
But
the
could you
room.
observe signatures or
Not at all.
envelopes?
They
or...
would not allow us to go beyond. I was sitting in a seat, and there was a pathway that was in front of me where they would actually bring the carts in that had the ballots in them in mail containers, and they would just go through that long aisleway and set them off on the side. Other than that, I was not able to talk to anybody. I was not able to see anything. Containers, and they would just go through that long aisleway and set them off on the side. Other than that, I was not able to talk to anybody. I was not able to see anything. I was not able to examine anything. So as a poll observer, I was really hindered by just being there and not being able to talk to anybody or see anything.
And what were they physically doing with the ballots?
Well, they were sitting at the tables. Again, there were 110 of them, so they were spread.
110 tables?
Yes.
And how many observers?
And I would say the room was probably as large as this room.
How many observers, Republican observers?
Well, I was the only.
You were the
I was the
only
only poll
Republican
observer on the Republican side. While
So
it was
110?
110
tables.
processors.
110 tables?
No, 110 processors.
On how?
2 at a table, so there were probably about 55 tables.
55 tables, 110 processes.
And I was the only Republican observer.
And you have only 2 eyes, right? You weren't
unless
selected
I'm wearing
because
my
you have
glasses.
more than 2 eyes.
Unless I'm wearing my glasses.
Then you have 4, okay. So, I mean, you couldn't see anything.
No, could not see anything.
They could have been putting phony ballots in and you wouldn't have known the difference.
Absolutely, it could have been.
Right? They could have been stuffing the ballot box.
Yes.
You're supposed to be there in order to make us comfortable
Yes.
that didn't happen.
Yes, sir.
Because mail-in balloting is prone to that kind of fraud.
That's exactly right.
So they completely frustrated you in your mission to do that. How many ballots? Now you have 55 tables, got 110 employees. We got one Republican, Mr. Minkus. You must have felt a little uncomfortable as the one Republican. Did you have your MAGA hat on?
Yes, and as I had asked the assistant manager there a couple questions as she came in and out 2 or 3 times throughout the entire day, I had asked her how many ballots they were actually processing. She said that they had about
enough to catch up?
2.8 million ballots that they were expecting to process during that election period. I think it was a 14-day period. And there would be about a little over 100,000 ballots a day that were going through there.
So those people were calculating,
They were
tabulating, checking out about 100,000.
They were moving very quickly.
Approximately 100,000 ballots.
They were moving very quickly to
without
get
any
over.
observation by Mr. Minkus, who was the only Republican there.
Exactly.
And did you raise an issue about that?
No, I didn't, because I didn't know whether anything that was going on there was proper or not proper. I was only there for 1 day, and I was just observing to see what questions I did want to ask, of which I asked a few questions, as well as that I realized that I was not able to actually see the process coming where the trucks come in, unload the ballots, see what was going on in the mailroom, how they process through the ballots.
It was just 1 day of that? 1 day?
I was there for 1 day.
And about 100,000 votes a day.
Yes, correct.
And then you mentioned that 35 people signed under penalty of perjury. Something about the green,
Yes.
the use of the green button. Would you explain that one more time so I get it right?
Yes. After the election was over with, the Arizona GOP had received many, many calls and complaints from voters about the fact that they felt that when they checked, their ballot hadn't been counted. So they were wondering what happened to it. So they wanted to know how they could check to see if their ballots were actually counted or what happened to them. As a result of that, the Arizona GOP had asked for volunteers to come in to make calls back to these people, these voters, to find all over the valley, to find out what the issues were that they had encountered. What I had uncovered that I just testified to was that many of these people that I talked to, there were at least 35 of them, for which I actually went out and picked up their affidavits. So I was able to talk to them not only the phone, but talk to them person to person, that they had told me that the experience they had was that they brought their ballot up to the machine, they put it into the machine, the poll worker that was there, when the green light went on, the poll worker that was there told them to push the green button. And they did, and the machine accepted their ballot, but yet it wasn't counted.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Is that you, Mr. Roberts, or Mr. Cook? Mr. Cook, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is to clear something up for us here from your testimony, sir. Okay, I don't know if anybody else noticed, but there were 3 drawers, and I'm confused. What do we need 3 drawers for? So my question is, the 2 drawers that were there, how were those ballots separated and why? Were votes for the presidential candidates, were they separated by that for 2 drawers? Was they separated for the county supervisor races? Why was there a need for 2 drawers if the ballot went through the machine, everything was good? Why 2 drawers? Do you know the answer to that?
No, I don't. but if you go on to the Secretary of State's website and take off the 2020 general election manual, it tells you in there how those machines were set up, and it explains to you what those 3 drawers were.
Okay, thank you. Next question I have was that, did you witness in any of your, and thank you for your work, by the way, did you witness anything like the testimony we have heard today where the lowering of standards on the site for signature verifications for any mail-in ballots, were those standards lowered at that site by any individual?
I did not observe that, so my answer to that would be I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Roberts?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Minkus, well, just to tack on to what Representative Cook was just asking, you stated earlier that you were not allowed to see the receiving process of those ballots. Does that include the signature verification? Is that what you were referring to earlier?
I wasn't allowed to see any part of the receiving process where the trucks would come to the building, they would be unloaded, they would go into the mail receiving room. The mail receiving room should have been able to separate the ballots by whatever method they would use to separate them. They were then supposed to go through a slicing machine. And these were things that I was told, but we were not actually able to see them.
Now, when you, if I may continue, when you say that you were told, because you also said something earlier that you were not allowed, you participated in 2016, 2018, and now 2020, and that some things changed from 16 and 18. I assume there's always going to be some minor changes here and there, but you said that you're not allowed to talk to them, and you're not allowed to walk around the polling place, which was contrary to the policy set forth by the Secretary of State. So were you given any reason as to why you were being told on the day of implementation of these policies why you were not allowed to do what was set forth in those policies as far as seeing the receiving process, as far as, you know, you're there obviously to observe. Were you given any, you said that you were prevented. How were you prevented? What did they say to you? And did they give you a reason as to why you couldn't do that?
The inspector at each of the polling locations, after I would come in and I would show them my official credentials, they would then give me instructions, and this went on in both locations that I served at, where the inspector would tell us that here's the seat where you can sit, and you can't walk around and talk to any of the poll workers or any of the voters, and if you do want to go any place in the facility, in the polling location, that you have to ask me first, and I will assign a poll worker to you for you to be able to walk around with. Now, that's contrary to the observers' information that was on the 2020 general election manual that was put out by the Secretary of State, which said, if an observer arrives at the voting location, the inspector should, number one, welcome the observer and thank them for their service. Number two, instruct them that they can observe operations but must maintain at least a 6 foot of physical distance from voters. Number three, work with the observer to find a few optimal locations in the vote center, that allow for observation without impeding the flow of operations. That's it. But I was told by the inspectors at each location that I must ask them for permission, and they must have a poll worker walk around with me.
Were you not considered a poll worker?
No, no.
You're a poll observer.
Poll observer, watcher observer is separate from poll worker.
Okay, one last question, Mr. Chairman. So from 2016 to 2018 to 2020, again, you stated there was changes. Was there anything else that stood out in 2020 as far as the changes from your experience from the prior two election cycles, as far as new rules and things? And
an unfriendly environment.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Minkus, Forgive me, but I'd like to expand on that a little bit. Unfriendly compared to previous years?
Yes.
And unfriendly, how so?
As a Republican poll worker, which I had a badge that I had to wear that said that I was a Republican poll observer, I felt intimidated by if I was walking anywhere in the facility, even to go to the bathroom, some of the poll workers would they'd kind of be intimidating. They'd be if I made a nice gesture or comment to them, I wouldn't get any kind of return back to that extent. You know, if you're having a good day, something of that nature. It was a rather intimidating, unfriendly environment.
So a failure to be cordial.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Senator Borelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mangus, now, were you a volunteer, or were you getting paid for that?
No, I was strictly volunteer.
So you did that completely out of patriotism and no pay, and yeah, no good deed goes unpunished, right? Now, did the Democrat poll, the other folks, your counterpart, did they have a badge also?
I had a selfish motive for doing what I did, and that is to save this country.
Yes, sir. Now your counterpart, did they also have a badge that identified Democrat?
Some of them did, some of them didn't, so that it wasn't consistent.
But you were...
They all had to come in with an identification. The Republicans were one color, the Democrats were another color. When I was at the election facility there for the short period of time that a Democrat was there, which they came in like about 2 in the afternoon, and we stayed till from 2 to like 4 in the afternoon. There was a Democrat there. She was sitting right next to me. The extent of the conversation I had with her started and ended with the fact that the Democratic office in Phoenix was destroyed sometime during the year by one of their workers. And I didn't know anything about it, frankly, but I mean, she went on and talking about it like that was the only thing that we ever got a chance to talk about. So, yeah, it was an environment that was not. I didn't really feel warm as a volunteer to actually feel like I was being accepted and being welcomed to be doing what I was doing.
One more question. You're a veteran, sir?
Am I a military veteran?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay.
I made it.
What era?
I was in during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service, sir. And I beyond your military service,
I'm sorry?
beyond your military service, sir,
Yes,
it's
sir.
people like you that make this country work. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Because we appreciate you.
All right, our next witness, and I know I'm very sorry that we have, it's been such a long day and we've had a number of witnesses that have had to go to work and have had to leave. So if I'm going to give you a couple minutes, if I call your name and you're not here, we'll go on to the next person, but we're going to try and work through this entire name list. The next individual up is Diane Sarah. Is Diane still here? All right, she'll be on her way. Oh, she's on Zoom. Well, let's see if we can find Diane Sarah on Zoom. I am not seeing Diane Sarah on Zoom. So if somebody wants to reach out to her, or maybe they know her, if she would like to try and get back on, that'd be great. Next up, Judith Burns. Judith there? Are you Judith? All right, great. Yeah, if not, you are now. All right. If you would please give your name, and if I'm just going to ask you to please be succinct about your experience as a poll worker. So please give your name and let's go.
I'm Dr. Judith Judith Burns. I'm a resident of Maricopa County, and I've been a public educator for 40 years at both the university and secondary levels of education. I was an observer at the Tabulation and Election Center on 2 occasions and a poll watcher in my community on 1 day. Initially, I chose to do this as a civic duty to my state and to my country. And I believed in the process. Excuse me. I'm nervous because this is so very, very important.
Ma'am, please don't be nervous. It's just us normal people that you're talking to.
We're on your side.
I know.
You said you were a teacher. We're nervous.
I know. I won't check your grammar.
Thank you.
I observed at the election center on 2 occasions, both in the signature verification room and in the ballot processing room. The first day I was in the signature verification room, I was a little bit, having never done this before, I was a little bit startled at the circumstances. I walked in, was set at a table, told to stay in that spot, and I was facing a room full of computers that all I could see was the back of them. There were some computers behind me, but no screeners there that day. There were maybe 8 or 9 people present that day. I couldn't see anything, and I was very disturbed by this, but wasn't really sure what to do. I did ask Celia, who I believe is one of the vice presidents of operations, why they were like that, and I was told because they needed to be set up that way due to the wiring systems. So I was there again 4 days later, and the room was full of screeners. I was able to turn my chair around and look through a plexiglass at one of the computer screens, which was maybe 6 feet from me. I could see it better when I was able to stand up, which I did. I kept looking at the screen because it seemed very odd. And in the bottom right-hand corner was a yellow banner. And I got into a position where I could see the yellow banner, which said low confidence. Then I started paying much closer attention to the signatures, thinking this didn't even make sense to me because the signature on the ballot that was being compared to other signatures didn't even resemble in any way what they were comparing it to. They were completely illegible. They were just scribbles on the ballot. And there were 5 screeners screening low confidence ballots for an entire afternoon that I was in there. And I asked Celia what the low confidence said, and she said just not to worry about that, that this was a new program that they were testing. And I said, okay. So I continued watching, and shortly after I talked with her, I had a few other questions, and at that time she suggested that I just sit down at the table where we were in our little area that we were supposed to remain. Shortly after that, there was a server outage, and I believe on my affidavit I said there was a power outage, but in actuality the lights were still on. It was just the servers in that room that went out for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm sitting there thinking, where did all those signatures go that were in the queue for them to check? That was one of my questions. Then, when the computers came back up, the gentleman that I could see quite well, all of a sudden had a green banner, and it said high confidence. And I just sat there very quietly watching, because then they had some conversations. There were 5 screeners all in one small area. They had some conversation. And the question from one of them to this gentleman was, are you still doing what we were doing, meaning low confidence? And he said, no, I'm doing high confidence now. And he was, out of those 5 screeners, he was then the only one that was doing high confidence signatures because he was the one I could see. And at least that's what I surmised. I don't know if it was coincidental that there was an outage, and I don't really know what all that means, but what was evident to me was the signatures that were going through there were not what they were trying to compare to. And so that was my concern that particular day. Let's see. The other experience was in the, I did ask Celia what happened to those votes. Were they counted? And I may have already said this, I don't think I did, but she said, yes, they were counted. And I gave her a puzzled look because it all seemed very odd to me, and I wasn't sure what to make of the fact that there were all these signatures that did not match, and then I was being told they were being counted. The other area that I was in the ballot processing room. We were in a room probably a little smaller than this. There had to have been 75 to 90 tables in there. There were 2 processors on each side of different parties, I was told. Again, I was probably as far away as that black curtain, and the room was this big. We couldn't see anything or really observe anything. There did seem to be a process for getting new ballots for them to take out of the envelopes and separate the ballot and the envelope. But what I noticed that raised some questions for me was they had their purses at their table, they had their cell phones there. During their break time, if they did not get up and leave their table, they were able to rummage in their purses and in their backpacks. People had backpacks there as well. And this bothered me. I wasn't really sure if this was appropriate. The other thing I found interesting in the whole process was when the press came in the second day that I was there. The 2 women that had been in a quality assurance role, is what I was told, that sat at tables, and I think if they had overvotes or undervotes on a ballot or an issue with a ballot, they would take to those women. All of a sudden, they were sitting at a table like this, one on each side, and they were processing the ballots very close to me. They weren't very far. They had set up a table very close to where I was as an observer, and the press was able to take pictures of us so that they could see that there were observers close to them, and they would get behind me, and they were directed that I was an observer. So they were trying to get pictures, including me in that, was the impression that I was given by the conversation I was hearing. The other experience I had was in my community at in the early voting. I got there very early, wanted to make sure I knew where I was supposed to be seated and what I was going to be able to see. And I was placed again against the wall, out of the way, so that I couldn't see anything. And when I got up to walk, keeping distance from people, and there was quite a bit of an area, it was in a gymnasium, so it was a large voting area. I wanted to see the process of when a person would put their driver's license in and then get their ballot printed out at the other end, go to their voting booth, and then turn in. I just wanted to walk the process to see what was going on. I was told to go sit down and to stay up against the wall, actually, quite a ways removed. Well, as it happened, where I was sitting was where people would come to turn in their ballots and put them in the slot. Well, many people did not want to take their masks off and lick their envelopes. And so they couldn't, they were trying water and a sponge and a rag. Well, the wetter the envelopes got, they would not stick. So they started putting masking tape on the envelope. And I guess it's the teacher in me, forgive me, but I did say to the supervisor, I'm not sure this is appropriate. I'm not sure these ballots will be counted, and I'm concerned. And I did call the number on the back of my badge that I was given, EDO, is that, I think that's it, the number that, and reported that this was going on. This went on all day long in this precinct. There was masking tape, there was tape, somebody had gone to get a dauber to try to get the envelopes to stick, but when I would watch people put them in, the envelope would open and so I don't know if those ballots fell out, if those ballots were ever counted. I'm not really sure what it meant. But what I ascertained from all of this was that there were just some odd things going on, and I was concerned. I was concerned both at the tabulation center by the fact that we weren't allowed to see signatures, that I was looking at low confidence signatures and was told that those votes would be counted, and then going to a precinct and seeing that envelopes were being taped with masking tape for an entire day. And I was very concerned about that. When I volunteered to serve as an observer, I did so with the belief in the process and the system. That belief has been shaken by this experience. It truly has. And I'm truly concerned for our future as a nation and as a state. And I truly hope that based on the facts and the information and the findings that you received today from the many, many people that are willing to come forward and state what they have observed, that you will make an honest decision so that the integrity of our state can be upheld. Thank you.
Dr. Burns, thank you very much for your courage and your service. Mr. Giuliani, do you have any questions?
So how many days were you there, Ms. Burns?
I was 2 days at the tabulations and election center and 1 day at a poll watching.
Which was first?
The tabulations and elections, 2 days there.
The 2 days at the tabulation center?
Yes.
And then after that at the election?
At the poll, the first day of early voting.
So at the tabulation center, most of the time it was hard for you to see anything.
I wasn't sure what my purpose was.
And you were there to make observations of the examination of the mail-in ballots, weren't you?
Correct.
To see if they were appropriate.
Right.
Filled out, whether the signature looked right, address there, name there. Did you ever get to see any one of them?
Not one.
Not one?
Not one.
So how many people in this center?
In the ballot processing room, there were approximately 90 tables, and it was a gymnasium-sized room. And the first day I was there, there might have been maybe 50 to 60 people in the room, 50 to 60 tables with 2 people at each table. The next day I went was during the week, and it was also the day when the press was coming, so all the tables were quite full.
So how many Republican observers were there in addition to you?
We were allowed 1 Republican and 1 other party in the room. That's it.
For the entire room?
For the entire room. And I made the mistake after lunch of going into the room, not knowing that somebody else had been assigned to that room, and I was told to leave.
And you were expected to cover 90 tables?
Yes.
And you were the only thing that stood between their cheating and our having some assurance that they weren't cheating.
Absolutely.
They could have been doing anything to those ballots they wanted to, correct?
Correct.
They could be accepting ballots that had no signatures.
Correct.
They could be selecting ballots that had 50 of the same signatures.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
They could have been taking ballots they had written up before and put them in there.
Well, I found it interesting in the ballot processing room that, and I did forget to say this earlier, tubs of ballots came in, and they were all rubber banded, but they were already opened. And so that when each table got their tub of I think it was
That's an interesting
250
fact.
ballots.
They were all open.
They were all opened. They had already been opened. And I did ask somebody, where do these ballots come from? Who opens them? And she said, they come from the mailroom. And I started to ask another question. And one question was about our limit that we were allowed to ask. When I started to ask another question, she walked away from me. So they were all open.
This was sort of kind of like the approach of your governor and secretary of state. See no evil, right? Feel no evil. Just ignore it. So the ballots came in a tub. Did the other ballots come in a tub? Did ballots usually come in a tub?
Well, they had been through this mail room, wherever
the
that
normal
was.
ballots that were coming in, what did they come in? What were they carried in?
They were like those tubs with the handles, the shallow tubs that were handled, and they were rubber band. And
But they were sealed, the normal ones. No, I say that the normal ones that came in were sealed.
we had no way of knowing. Nobody ever observed them coming into the mail rooms, or when they were opened, or by whom they were opened, or if anybody accessed those.
Well, when you saw the ballots being brought to the tables, could you see whether they were open or closed?
They were all opened. They were already
all
of them.
All
were
the
open.
ballots were open that you saw.
The people at the tables would open them up, pull the ballot, check the number on the ballot and the envelope so that they coincided. They would separate them. They would have their pile of ballots and the envelopes, and at that point they were separated.
So they didn't really have to open the envelope. Theoretically, they had to just check it, take out the secure. I mean, let's describe it to people as an outer envelope, and that has the name, address, the district in which they're voting, and a signature.
Right.
That's how you identify it.
Right.
The inner envelope is called a secure envelope.
There was one envelope. It was the green envelope. There are not two envelopes. There's just the one.
Well, wait. There was just one envelope?
One envelope.
And a ballot inside?
Yes.
A naked ballot inside? Not in a secure envelope?
No, there were not two envelopes. Maybe correct? The green envelope is the only envelope that we have.
Well, no, there's supposed to be a secure envelope inside because your ballot is supposed to be anonymous.
There were not two envelopes. There was one envelope. It was
that may
green.
explain why they were open.
Right. They went through some sort of a system where they opened them. But we signed the back of our envelopes, and on the front of that envelope is the mailing address to the county.
Did you do a mail-in vote?
Did I personally? I hand carried mine and put it.
But was it a mail-in vote?
Yes.
Well, was there an envelope you had to put the ballot in?
Yes, a green envelope, one envelope.
One envelope and the naked ballot.
Correct.
No other envelope.
No duplicate. And in other states that I have lived in, there were two envelopes.
Okay. So when it came in, it was open already?
Yes.
And all they did was separate it?
Right.
Did they look at the back of the envelope?
No, because the envelopes are, I believe, are scanned in, and the signature verification room is where that number that is on the envelope coincides with the signature, and those are scanned in. So my understanding is that in the signature verification room, they do not know anything that's on the ballot. They only have the signature, and they are checking it against other signatures, driver's license, previous voting.
Did you see that done?
That's what I was trying to see in the signature verification.
Did you ever get to see it?
Just that one gentleman who was doing low confidence and then switched to high confidence.
And you were the only Republican doing that too?
I was the only one in that.
So if you weren't doing it, nobody else was?
Correct.
So that was all being done secretly? Well, secretly meaning without any Republican observers?
Right. Because the rest of the room was full. There were maybe 14 computers there, and it was full, and they were all, I couldn't see any of them.
So how many of these ballots would you estimate went into the vote without a Republican getting a chance to even glimpse at the envelope?
As much as I would like to answer that, I can't even
just
guesstimate. It was an entire afternoon.
How long were you there?
I was there 2 afternoons.
For how long each afternoon?
4 hours.
And how many ballots could they do in an hour?
Well, this was interesting. Some of them would click, 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 click without really looking at them. They would just sort of glance at it and go on to the next one and go on to the next one. There was one gentleman that seemed a little more intent on actually looking at the signatures that he was comparing to, and he would take maybe 10 or 15 seconds per signature. But some of them just kept clicking and clicking and clicking.
And how many of these tables were doing it?
Well, the first day I was there, I believe there were 8.
8?
8 computers, 8
Okay.
different people. There might have even been 9, 8 to 9 people. The second day, I believe the room holds almost 20 people, and it was pretty full.
Pretty much 20 people?
Yeah.
So, were they doing one a minute?
Oh, no, seconds. Oh,
One every 2 or 3 seconds?
Well, one gentleman was clicking and clicking and clicking. I'm not sure what he was looking at, but he wasn't looking too...
What do you think would be a good estimate? One per?
An estimate probably would be one every, maybe 8 to 10 seconds.
Okay, let's say 10 seconds. One per
Okay,
10
so
seconds.
6 per...
And how many hours were you there?
I was there 4 hours.
4
so
hours.
He's doing the math.
4 hours the first day when you had the 8 to 9.
Right.
And then 4 hours the second day when you had the 20 people.
Correct.
And that was the day the press was there.
Right.
Gee, how did I know that?
That was in the ballot processing room, though.
Were
They
they
were
all
not in
dressed?
the-
Were they all dressed up better? And
Pardon?
Were they all dressed up better when the press was there and had more makeup on?
A couple of them, yes.
Just wondering.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that's a lot of ballots that you didn't get to examine.
Right.
I mean, that's a lot of fraudulent ballots to stuff in a day, in 2 days.
But that was just
Have
2
you
days.
realized the enormity of the cheating that was going on in front of you? Do you have any sense of the... I mean, these are going to amount to thousands of votes that were
Right.
put into the system without any opportunity for the opposition to observe them, which the law demands and fairness requires.
I went home that night, and I could not stop thinking about what I
bet
had
you
seen.
couldn't.
I was so disturbed by it. I contacted Gina Swoboda, who was my contact person, and arranged for me to observe. And first I texted her. She asked me to write an email, and then I got very specific in my email. I was so disturbed by what I had seen. I went into this in good faith that people did the right thing, and that's not what I saw. I've never had the opportunity to provide a civic service like this before, and I was truly astounded at what I saw. And the way people were polite, but the way I was treated. Go sit over there. I was at that black curtain, and the closest table to me was further away than I am from that black curtain.
And you did this for no compensation. And tell us the reason again you did it.
I did it because I'm a retired university professor, and I wanted to be involved in this process. I believe in our country. I believe in this
Well, thank you.
process. And I'm so disappointed in what I saw.
You're shocked.
I was shocked, absolutely shocked. And at first I thought, maybe it's me. I've not done this before. I don't really know specifically what I should be looking for, but it didn't feel right. I didn't know what it really meant, but it didn't feel right. And the way things appeared, especially in the signature verification room, really disturbed me.
I'm very sorry for what happened to you.
Well,
Shouldn't happen in America.
That's
That
why
should,
I'm
that should
here.
happen in China or Venezuela.
Well, that's why I'm here today.
Well, maybe you'll make it back into America. help us become America again.
I would like to. Thank you.
Just not so fast. Members, any questions? Yes. Representative Bartow.
Thank you, Dr. Burns. This is really troubling. I mean, when you think about signature verification, that's so basic. I just have a question about how this works out. From your observation, does each click mean that it was accepted? You're talking about the clicks.
I don't know.
So there could be a click that it's not accepted?
And this was something that I can't answer. I don't really know that.
Well, if it wasn't accepted, do you know what happens to those ballots that were not accepted? Did they go somewhere else that you observed where they would be adjudicated properly?
Well, later on I found out that some of them would go to somebody else and they would follow up on them. But my thinking was there were so many that weren't even close to the signature. How could they possibly follow up on those? So I don't really know where they went, and the clicking was, I didn't know. I tried to look. I tried to see what they were doing, but
you couldn't tell whether
questions, I was shut down.
You couldn't tell whether they were clicking accepted or not accepted?
No, there was nothing on the screen to indicate that. It was strictly on the keyboard.
Why have poll observers? I don't understand.
I know. That was my question after the first day, and then after the second day, I was really disturbed.
Thank you.
Senator Borelli.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Burns, thank you for your service. My question goes back to the ballots coming out of the mailroom. They were already opened up.
Yes.
So would you suspect that possibility that they were opened up in the mailroom and a ballot was switched out and put in?
I would have no idea on that.
Could you speculate on that?
It would be possible.
Extremely possible.
Yes, it would be possible.
Let me ask you another question. In your teaching profession in all those years, if you caught a student cheating, what would your response be?
Oh. I wouldn't be very happy about it, and they would be in great trouble, and after a phone call home, they probably would fail.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I'm sure we all feel the same way. Thank you.
Dr. Burns, I want to, forgive me, I want to kind of run back at the envelope thing, because apparently Maricopa County runs differently than Pima County, which is where I'm from.
Okay.
So when a Pebble ballot is returned, a permanent early voter list ballot, that's what PEVL stands for. When you return that, it's an envelope inside of an envelope with a ballot on the inside. And what I hear you saying, I just need to be crystal clear on this. Right. The tubs that you saw with envelopes were singular envelopes with a ballot in them, all open.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry, Senator Allen?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Burns. I'm really curious about the low confidence and the high confidence. It's got me really curious. And you're saying that the screen with the low confidence, you couldn't see that the signature matched at all to any of, okay, so they're looking at one signature and trying to match it to other signatures that are on the page?
Yes.
Am I getting that right?
Yes.
And you could see that from where you were sitting that the signature did not match any of those.
Most of them did not match any of the ones they were trying to match it to. It wasn't, in many cases, not all, it was just a scribble. It was just a flick of the hand.
So ma'am, maybe the low confidence might mean I'm not sure that this matches, but I'm going to pass it off anyway, or something. I don't know. That's kind of what I'm thinking maybe that it means.
Well, that was the impression that I had.
Yeah.
And I think many of them were passed on, and that was my concern and what truly bothered me.
Thank you.
Dr. Burns, just really quick, I know that you probably would like to get out of this chair.
That's fine.
When you were watching that, and this is just a real simple response I'm looking for, did you notice any stark differences? For example, you said a scribble. Well, what we didn't hear is the signature they were comparing it to. Was it so clear and convincing to you that it's like, this is a signature, this is a chicken scratch?
Right. It was that clear to me
All right.
on many of them.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Oh, just a moment.
Two quick ones.
Two quick ones.
What did you teach?
I was a director of choral activities in music.
I was hoping you taught ethics. Maybe you should now.
And as you now know, I didn't teach math.
Well, I don't do math very well either, but I just want to tell you I computed what you said, 4 hours, 8 or 9 tables the first day, 1 per 10 seconds. That'd be about 12,000 ballots that went in that were unobserved. The second day we had 20 people, that'd be 150,000. That's a lot of votes.
It was.
That's way more than the votes that decided this election. Way more. So if this is true, and we have no reason to believe it isn't true, I mean, all these people who are so upset saying that they cheated have to confront the fact that there are numerous American citizens who were sworn under oath that they did cheat. You gave us an affidavit under oath, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
You understand what that means, right?
Yes, I do.
I'm sure you do. Thank you. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Now, ma'am. Okay, looks like we're not going to get out of the question zone quite yet. Representative Roberts, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Burns, you said earlier that when you were looking at it and they were saying that it was in yellow and there was low confidence, that you asked about it and they told you that it was a new program that they were testing?
Yes.
And they were testing this new program on live ballots?
This is what I was told.
Did they give you any further explanation on that? Okay.
No.
And one other thing, you also mentioned that you had concerns about where you were sitting after you had got up and walked around and you were told not so nicely to sit, that you had concerns about a masking tape issue that kind of went on for the better part of the day, and you asked about that. Did you ever get an answer on that, if there was an issue with that?
I was told not to worry about it.
Oh.
By the supervisor.
Not to worry about it.
And that's, yes, and that's when I called. I did that very early in the morning. Voting had just started, and this obviously was going to be an issue right from the get-go of voting that day. And it was the first day of early voting, so they had not come across this. People did not want to take off their masks and seal their envelopes. So within the first, 15 to 20 people that came through, I would say at least half of those, if not more, had masking tape put on them because they couldn't seal the envelope. Some tried water on the sticky part, and by the time they put water on it, there wasn't enough on there to seal it. But they just went ahead and put it in the...
Right. When you asked about this, and you were told not to worry about it, who were you speaking with?
The supervisor at the precinct where I was observing.
And that supervisor is a county employee? Is that correct? It's not somebody that, because you're there because you're a volunteer,
basis, right.
and you're going through a partisan process to be a volunteer, correct? Mm-hmm. And so when you're reporting your concerns, you're talking to somebody that actually works for Maricopa County. They're an employee. It's not
She was a precinct captain, and somebody else might be able to address that more than I can. She was the supervisor that everybody came to if there were questions regarding anything or the machines when people would put in their driver's license. And there were actually a precinct captain and a precinct supervisor there. And those were the people that were in charge as far as I could tell.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fellow members on the panel, I just want to point out that not only this witness, but most witnesses, this is not a Republican or Democrat issue. Everything that we've talked about is about elections, and every vote counts, every legal vote counting, as we're getting beat up out there on the fake news media cycle here. So all of my questions have been answered except one. First of all, the low confidence signatures that you witnessed, which were just scribbled, no matter what party, who they were voting for, ran through the machine, clicked on, moved on the system. They were not taken care of. The next thing is one of my colleagues brought up is one of the things I had is that the all ballots were open when you received them. All the ballots were open when they came in there, highly irregular. So I can't imagine anyone saying out there tonight in the news media that we are in here and there is no proof about voter integrity in elections in Maricopa County. It just baffles me. When these people have signed sworn affidavits that are saying under the penalty of perjury, this is what they've witnessed. Nothing to see here, move on. It's just nuts down here in this city. Okay, but here's the question I think that all the members should notice right here. I heard you say in your testimony, now correct me if I'm wrong, you emailed in detail to the correct people these highly irregular things that you witnessed during you volunteering for this position, but maybe I missed it, I didn't hear. Did you even get a response?
Yes, I did. And that's, well, let me think. I initially texted, I got a response requesting an email, and then it was at that point, after the election, that I was contacted to complete an affidavit.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Burns, thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Next up is Kathleen Alvey. Kathleen, are you in the building? All right. Kathleen, if you would, please come over, have a seat.
By those people that were in here, and he's on this no evidence. No evidence.
If you would, please give your name.
Kathleen
Kathleen.
Elvey.
All right. Kathleen, and you're going to have to get a little bit closer to the microphone so folks can hear you. Please, if you would like to tell us your story.
I volunteered to do polling, and I received an email that Pima County Recorder's Office was not allowing us to be in the polls for early voting. So I ended up at the Pima County Election Center. I went on October 15th from 9 to 1, and I was escorted in by a supervisor. She kind of gave me the layout of what the different departments were. We saw offices when we first walked in, but we also saw some little cubicles. She walked me around inside the cubicle. There was one, and then behind that there was a second one, and there was a little machine there. She said this is where the duplicates got entered in, and I asked her why there was only one chair in there. And she said, oh, we don't have to worry about that right now because it's not done until the 20th, and this was only the 15th. So she took me into a second room, and this had poll workers throughout the entire room. She said that the door to the east of us was for where they were verifying signatures, and that I was not supposed to go in there. She showed me around the room, and then she showed me a chair and said, this is where you can sit. And I said, well, how can I observe if I'm sitting? And so she allowed me to walk up and down the aisles of people and observe what they were doing. The first hour...
excuse me just a moment.
Would it be all right if we just took a short break?
Sure.
Because we have somebody who wants to make a statement.
Oh, I'd be happy to accept that statement, Mr. Mayor.
And he's probably confused about the time.
Well, there's a lot of people that happens to in this state. Now you're on.
Is this one on? Yes.
Yes, it is.
All right, so Mr. President, your line is now connected.
Well, thank you very much. I've been watching the hearings, and they're fascinating. incredible, and I want to just thank you. Doing this very brave thing, and I know some get heat, but I will tell you many more get praise from the American public. We got 74 million votes, 11 million more votes than we had in 2016. We were looking to get about 68 million votes, and we said that would easily win. Well, we got 74 million votes, and getting above that number even could hit 75. But we got 74 million, and we didn't win. But I know that we won Arizona, and we won Michigan, and we won Georgia, and we won Pennsylvania, and we won Wisconsin. But what they did is they played games, and games like nobody's ever seen before. This is the first time Republicans, or first time anyone has fought back. The 2020 election was rigged. It was a scam, and the whole world is watching, and they're laughing at our country. They're laughing at us. They know who won, and we won by a lot. The poll watchers were thrown out of buildings or put at very far away distances, but they were thrown out of buildings in numerous of the states. You have people that came in to vote, and they were told, I'm sorry, but you've already voted. We've received your ballot. No, I never voted. I'm very proud to vote. November 3rd, I'm very proud to vote. No, we have your ballot. And they would go in and they would sign a complaint. In some cases, they went home and they cried. They've never seen anything like it. We have thousands and thousands of people that walked in. This shows you how arrogant the Democrats and others were in taking away and stealing an election, because that's what they're trying to do, is steal it. And the easy route for me, when everyone's saying, oh, just focus on 2024, sir, focus on 2024, I said, no, I have to focus on 2 weeks ago, because this is the greatest scam ever perpetrated upon our country. This is the big one. And we went through plenty. We went through the phony Russia, the phony impeachment, and all of the different things. And then on top of it, you have a governor named Ducey, who just he just rushed to sign certificates so that Kelly gets into the Senate as soon as possible. What's that all about? He didn't have to sign. And I say, why would he sign when you have these incredible hearings going on that's showing such corruption and such horrible fraud in the people of Arizona? So you have to figure out what's that all about with Ducey. He couldn't go fast enough. And I just say that I want to thank you. We're going to win this thing. We're not giving up. There's never been anything like this. Thousands and thousands of votes were cast, and you have some people that were paid to vote. You know that. And, you know, we're only down to 9,000 votes. It's a very small number of votes relative to millions cast. We lost Arizona by 9,000 votes. That's a tiny fraction. Now, that would be a half a day, a couple of hours of checking. Well, I will tell you, we are going to fight. We're taking it up all the way. We have additional cases being filed probably tomorrow in Wisconsin and in Georgia. And they're good cases. They're very strong cases by great lawyers and with great facts. And Arizona will not forget what Ducey just did. We're not going to forget the people of Arizona. We had some of the greatest rallies we've ever had. I left those rallies. A lot of you probably were there. And I said, there's no way we lose this state. And we didn't lose the state. We didn't lose the state. We won it by a lot. But I just want to thank everybody. I'm watching it, and a lot of people are watching it on OEN and a couple of others that are ratings machines. Their ratings are going through the roof because they're telling the truth. And others are being hurt, as you probably have heard. Other networks are being very badly hurt because when they don't follow us, they don't do very well. But the world is watching, and this country is watching, and we admire all of the people, and that includes the fantastic representatives, politicians, but these representatives that are up there and doing a great job. And what they don't realize is they may hear some things, but they're becoming legend. They're becoming legend for taking this on. The country really appreciates it. The country really does, and we have more than they do. I represent everybody, but this was a scam, and we have to get down to the bottom of it. I want to thank Rudy and his team for doing such an incredible job and for having the courage to leave because they were threatened. So for having the courage, Rudy, we thank you. And you know, Rudy was, and I say this, Rudy was the greatest mayor in the history of New York by far. You look at what happens in New York. I mean, you look at what's going on right now. He was the greatest we've ever had. And I told Rudy the other day, what you're doing right now concerning the elections of United States President and other elections, but concerning the election of the President of the United States, and as good as being mayor was, and so important, but this is far more important, is the most important thing you've ever done. So I want to thank Rudy. I want to thank all of the political representatives, and I want to thank all of the incredible witnesses for showing bravery and love of your country. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I'm sorry for the interruption.
Well,
Kind of outranks us. Man, you can literally say, I approve that message and be done.
so, Mr. Mayor, now that we've been upstaged seriously, we would like to thank the President. I think that was that's what this team needed to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Kathleen, no pressure. So please proceed with your story, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I was observing the different tables, and the supervisors didn't stop me whatsoever. I walked up and down the aisles for all the 4 hours that I was there. After about the first hour, I noticed that there were a lot of ballots that were coming in that were being removed from envelopes that were faxed in. And the supervisor said, those are military or absentee. But there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them coming in. And I asked, well, what is the chain of command? How do we know for sure that these faxes are accurate and they're from the people who sent them? And I said, how do you verify a signature? If they've got the ballot and they have the envelope, why can't they just somehow get here in the envelope that they were originally given? And she told me that there was not an answer that she could give me. She didn't know the answer, that I would have to ask the other supervisor. So when the other supervisor came in, I asked her the same thing, and she told me the exact same answer, that she didn't know, that all happened in the verification of signature section, and we weren't in that area. So I was walking through again for a while, and then a representative from the Republican side at one of the tables that was working as a poll worker, he asked the same question, and he got the same answer. There was no clear answer for him either. The ballots, when they were processed, were then put into these blue containers that were supposed to go to the front of the room. They were then sealed and locked by the supervisor. When I left at 1 o'clock, there were still 6 sitting there with the supervisor out to lunch, and none of them were locked. Also, the ballots that were coming in that were faxes were called duplicates because they had to be manually entered. They didn't get secured at all. They went into a little basket on the side of the room, and then women from another area came in and got them and left with them. So I never saw what happened with those. But those same women were also coming in, and they were taking the postage boxes full of ballots and leaving with them as well. And they were going to a different area of the facility that I was not given access to, because the room that I was in I was basically told that's where all the processing went. But then I saw the ballots leaving. So when I left at 1 o'clock, I immediately sent an email to the chair of the Republican Party and said, I have some concerns about this. First of all, the chain of custody for the ballots that are faxed in, but also because there were things that I wasn't seeing behind the scenes. So.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Giuliani, do you have any questions for this lady?
Sure.
Please proceed.
So, Ms. Alvey, tell us the room that you were in. What was it, a tabulation room?
It was a well, there was
what would
no
you call
machines.
it?
It was just a processing. There were workers at tables, and there was 2 different people from 2 different parties. And what they were doing was they were working as a team. They would pull the ballots out of the envelopes that were signed. They were putting the signature envelopes to the side, and those went back in the boxes. But then the ballots were laid out flat. If there was any questions about it, if it was ripped, or if it had a signature, or if there's any kind of default on it. Like, there was one gentleman who asked, because it was done in marker, and the supervisor told him, oh, it's okay. There's no problems with using markers on this. And she said, just send it through. And so he just processed it regularly. Other than that, at the other end of the room, though, there were people who were not taking ballots out of envelopes. They were just counting ballots. There was a machine and a gentleman counting it with a machine, but then the people who were sitting at the tables, they actually had lists, and the lists needed to correspond with the ballots. So they would have a bundle of ballots, they would check the names. If it was all correct, they'd bundle it back up and put it back in. There was one woman who didn't have a ballot that matched her list, and she was walking through the aisles looking for light boxes, because each of the ballot boxes that came through from the signature areas were labeled, like B1, B2, B3. So she was looking for anyone who was tabulating or working with the boxes that had a B5 on it, because there was a misplaced ballot from that.
And what day are we talking about?
October 15th.
October 15th. So this is early voting.
Correct.
Was that the only day you were there?
That was the only day I was there.
And what were you there? What were you told you were there for?
I was told I was just there to observe, just watch, make sure that everything was on the up and up. When I first went in there, I did oversee a class for new poll workers that came in. Okay. So that I would kind of have an idea of what they were doing and how the process was done. I noticed, the nice thing that I noticed was there were no pens in the room. So I didn't see anyone using a pen on any ballots at that point. It was all like Sharpie or markers, colored markers, like highlighters. And there were red pens, but the red pens were for the duplicate ballots that came in. They were supposed to be numbered and isolated by precinct on a piece of paper. And then those went to, like I said, the basket that then left the room, and I don't know where they went after that.
Where were the signatures being verified?
There was a room to the east of where we were at, behind closed doors, and that was a different section.
Did you get to observe that?
No, ma'am. No, sir.
How many Republican observers were there?
Well, the room was divided half and half of all different parties. So there were, at one table, there was a Republican and a Democrat. There was a Republican and independent. I saw a Democrat and a Green Party. I mean, each table had two different people, two different political
These were tables after the envelope had already been examined.
Then all the,
in a different room, right?
Right, that was done in a different
room.
So
who was observing that? Do you know?
I don't know. I did give a list to Thomas Lane of all the people who were supposed to be observing through the whole election time.
So you don't know if there was observation of the signature verification?
I do not.
And then after the signature verification, the ballots were brought into your room?
Correct. There was large trays of ballots that were brought in.
And in your room, they were being counted?
There were some being counted off to the right of the room, and then in the area, well, I was able to go into both, because I was able to wander.
And what else were they doing with them other than counting?
Well, they were counting, and then they were removing them from the envelopes.
They were being removed from, they hadn't been removed from the envelopes already?
No.
Okay.
Most of them were cut open, though, so all they had to do was reach in and pull out the insides.
And then you complained about this.
Well, I complained not necessarily about this. I complained about the chain of command or the chain of custody that all of these faxes, because there were so many, and I questioned that because I wasn't sure. I mean, because I could be in Michigan and I could fax something to Pima County and it could be rerouted anywhere through any fax, And how do I know that it didn't come from Afghanistan?
Right.
So that was my concerns. So, and I was told by the chairman of the Republican Party that a lot of people come away with frustrations like this because there are no good answers unless you're there watching and you know exactly where the faxes are coming from.
How many ballots were processed during this? How long were you there? How many hours?
I was there for 4 hours.
How many ballots do you think were processed while you were there that you didn't get to observe?
I don't know, because the boxes that left the room and the duplicates that left, I don't know where they went. So I don't know how many were in each sleeve of the post office boxes. I do know that in one box, just from observing, there could be anywhere from 100 to 300 ballots in one box. So.
What do you think? In 4 hours, how many of those boxes did they go through?
Well, when I left, they were on H. So when I left, they were on the letter H. They were working on the H's. So that would have been a couple 100,000.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Members, any questions?
I do.
Representative, or I'm sorry, Senator Allen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk a little bit more about the duplicates. From the duplicates, or they think there's something wrong with the ballot so that it wouldn't process, so that then they go and they make another ballot, another duplicate ballot. In that process, and you said, though, that was there a lot of those duplicates?
Yes, thousands of them.
Thousands of them?
Yes, they were, at one point, that's all that they were processing, were the faxed ones.
Well, the faxed, okay, the faxed ones were saying they were from the military, and then they would go and make a duplicate of that to run through the thing. But here's what my concern is, that who then observes the person making the duplicate, because they're going and marking another ballot, probably, is that what they're doing, or do they go and punch it into the machine? How do they make the next duplicate ballot? That's what I'd like to know. And is there two observers watching that to be sure that it is done correctly according to the original ballot and who they wanted to vote for?
I agree.
And if there's thousands involved, then I would be very concerned. There should absolutely be an observer and two people involved in processing that original document to be sure that the duplicate absolutely matches. And we've heard some of that today, and so that's my concern. And you just have no idea then how they process that?
No, like I said, all the duplicates were put into a basket, and then someone came and cleared that basket every half an hour or so. But they were cleared out into a different room that I wasn't given access to. So I don't know how that was done. I do know that when I first came in, the supervisor showed me the little cubicle that was behind a cubicle, and she said that this is where the duplicates were manually entered in by a person. And that's when I questioned her about, are there two people here at the time? And she said, well, because this is only the 15th, we don't have to worry about that right now, because ballots don't get entered in until after the 20th. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish we had somebody from the election department that could help explain some of these questions that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We appreciate your time. I know that you have been here for a number of hours waiting patiently, but I hope it was worth it. Yes. Thank you. It was for us. All right. Next up, we have Mark Lowe.
She gets to brag that the president interrupted her.
Yes, indeed. And then after Mark Lowe, Linda Brickman. Or maybe Linda Brickman now and Mark Lowe's no longer here. Okay, Mr. Lowe appears to have left the building. So, Ms. Brickman. I'm sorry, Mrs. Brickman. Please give your name and let us know what you know.
All right. My name is Linda Brickman.
You're going to need to get really close to the mic because people have been saying that they can't hear us.
Okay. My name is Linda Brickman, and I want to thank you, all of you, legislators, chairman, and Mr. Mayor, for letting me come forward and be able to speak today. Effective November 12th, 2020, as the first vice chair of Maricopa County Republican Committee, the MCRC, by operation of law upon the resignation of the chairman, I took over the performance of the chairman's duties. I was notified by Ray Valenzuela, Director of Elections, that the logic and accuracy LNA certification of the Dominion voting systems would take place on November 23rd. With limited notice, I was later notified the date was moved to November 18th, 2020 at 10 a.m. There will be about 11 issues that I need to share with you today. For a little background, I arrived at Maricopa County Tabulations and Election Center, MECTEC, prior to 10 o'clock a.m. for what was supposed to be the morning turnaround inspection of the Dominion software and equipment. However, it took some 8 hours before the two formal LNA certifications were completed with mixed results. To be replaced. Incorrect information had been inputted into each tabulator earlier that morning, and the wrong files were loaded up into the mainframe by the computer technician, and neither the SOS Secretary of State staff nor the computer technician were able to quickly resolve the problems. Instead, we were all alerted that it might take an hour or more to work things out. So we all adjourned at 2 o'clock to take lunch. At approximately 2 p.m., I asked if the problems were resolved and what had happened. Instead, I was informed that the machines were not calculating correctly, and all the machines had to be shut down during a break, during the lunch break, and reset, and they were going to start on a brand new test. About an hour plus later, the ballots were run into the tabulators, and printouts of the results in the form of a cashier's tape were received by me and others. Then the memory sticks from each tabulator were removed and handed to the computer technician for loading into the server, along with other relevant files, as we were told. Printouts were then generated by the Dominion server, and county chairs from the 3 county political parties, as well as other observers, began comparing the individual voting totals tabulated for accuracy. Once completed, the county chairs were asked to fill out and sign the certification for the SOS LNA. As per Ray Valenzuela, the Director of Elections, and other observers, they were asked to sign if they insisted, but only as an observer capacity and not in an official capacity. Then it came time for us to sign the certification. Based on the issues described above with the SOS LNA test and my familiarity with reports from other state Secretary of States, for example, Texas, and other information that I had and that I turned over to the BOS, which is the Board of Supervisors, I went ahead and signed and denied certification, writing on the form, quote, "Certification denied, Linda Brickman, MC, Maricopa County Chairman," unquote. We then began the second LNA test, but this one was conducted by Maricopa County election staff and on separate Dominion voting tabulation machines. This was a similar process with results going to the server, and reports were then again printed out. But for whatever problems or irregularities that surfaced during the first SOS test, they did not manifest this time. And then for the same reasons noted above, I denied certification, writing on the Maricopa County form, quote, certification denied, Linda Brickman, MC Maricopa County Chairman, unquote. I also have copies of all the ballots counted with copies available upon request later. Again, my reasons, as noted, were above my first-hand observations of the flaws and irregularities in the SOS LNA tabulating and calculating of the Dominion software, the unexplained turning off of the computer system and doing a reset versus a correction, and the over 5 hours for the SOS test and results review, plus my lack of faith in the second LNA test. We could see the machines, but we could not see or observe the software behind the machine to confirm what had really gone on. As a veteran county elections worker who actually worked the election both during the August primary and the general from 10/19/20 to 11/11/20, working on signature verification room, the duplication room, adjudication room, ABC room, and the hand count audit. Let me share at least 6 irregularities that I personally observed. Number 1, signature verification standards were constantly being lowered by supervisors in order to move more quickly and process the higher amount of early and mail-in ballots from approximately 15 points of similarities, where you see a rounded L or a straight line, a number of different similarities that we were told through maybe an hour process of training prior to all this beginning. From the 15 points of similarities, reduced to a minimum of 3, lowered to 1, and ultimately none. Just past each signature verification through, we were told. Too many rejections have already been turned in and reviewed. We need to move more quickly. This is not the way an election should be run. Where's the integrity? 2, alleged signatures and challenged signatures on envelopes where the signature was completely different from the person and the name as a listed voter. These were let through and approved by supervisors. So the ones who signed the envelopes were not the actual voter, but these were allowed to go through with Maricopa County verified, stamped on the outside of each affidavit envelope. 3, challenged runs or batches of envelopes for signatures, verification observed by me to be the exact same handwriting on the affidavit envelopes. And these were on various ballots. I saved what was the ballot number, and I believe I've turned it in. If not, I do have that information, where there were at least 30 ballots that I saw at one time that were all signed by the same handwriting, but on different voters' names. When I asked the county attorney if the county attorney would be alerted for possible fraud, I was told no, but supervisors would take care of it. In the dupes room, number 4, and this is the duplication room, I observed with my Democratic partner the preparation of a new ballot since the original one was soiled or wouldn't go through the tabulators. I read her a Trump Republican ballot, and as soon as she entered it into the system, the ballot defaulted on the screen to a Biden Democratic ballot.
Just what I asked.
We reported this to the supervisors, and others in the room commented that they had witnessed the same manipulation. We were never told what, if any, corrective action was taken. All I know is the next day I was called outside the room that I was working in signature verification by the supervisor saying, I understand you caused some problems this week, and saying that you thought our machines were not working correctly. And I was being the one that was scolded. And I was told at that point in time, I could not discuss anything or talk about what was going on, as many people were threatened, because they were told that their voices would be suppressed. They would be either have to leave the room and not work there again. I'm here because I think this is our duty to speak the truth and tell the truth. Number 5, election office observers. When it became apparent that more and more early and mail-in ballots need to be processed, I mentioned that the current role of the number of observers per party was not adequate. 1 per party unless all parties agreed to more. And since the governor refused to call the legislature into session for whatever his reasons, and little incentive for the Democrats to agree to a higher adequate number, there was no way that 1 observer per party who were forced to the back of the room or to have to watch behind a closed-in wall or a see-through wall would have legitimate opportunity to see what election workers were actually seeing in real time and doing, especially where up to 20 or more workers processing tests, sometimes in 10 seconds or less. And I personally observed most observers acting clueless and did not believe any of them even recognize the challenges that I was referencing above. Number 6, one of the most egregious. In both the duplication and adjudication rooms, which I worked, I observed the problem of Trump votes with voters, checking the bubble for a vote for Trump, but also writing in the name Donald Trump under the write-in candidate and checking the bubble next to his handwritten name again as a duplicated vote. And this would continue on as an overvote, which means no vote was counted at all, despite the policy having been changed to allow these overvotes. Supervisors contradicted their own policies where the intent was clear. Ray Valenzuela, Director of Elections, told me openly the morning of the Dominion certification, November 18, 2020, that this was incorrect. The supervisors were terribly mistaken, and as an adjudicator, I was instructed incorrectly that these many votes should have been counted and not turned away as an overvote. Chairman Fincham, legislators, Mayor, I am here today, again, not as an expert in the Dominion software, but I'm here as a voter in Maricopa County who wants to hear and speak the truth, even though myself and many others have been suppressed to speak before you now. There should be integrity in our voting and our voting electorate. Voting is not a right. Voting is not a privilege. Voting is not an option. Voting is an obligation for every legal American citizen. God bless America, and God bless Donald Trump.
Thank you, Ms. Brickman. Just one point of clarification. You mentioned Ray Valenzuela.
Yes, sir.
Is this the same Ray Valenzuela that stood before the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and told them that no dead people voted?
I'm sorry
that no dead people voted?
I cannot answer to that, sir. I don't know.
All right. Actually, we need to have another witness for that I don't believe is here. Mr. Giuliani, do you have any questions for Mrs. Brickman?
Mrs. Brickman, I would like to ask you this as the head of the party in Maricopa, and imagine you've been involved in Republican politics for a while?
Close to 30-some, 40 years.
Well,
a while.
Thank you very much for your dedication to the party. This is really in the nature of advice. Why? Let me ask it this way. I have this feeling that if I were representing a Democrat president, and this was a Democrat governor and Democrat legislature, and I called up with a third of these allegations, we would have had a special session. They would have canceled out the vote, and they would have designated the electors for Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, or some other scoundrel like that, without much fuss. Now, I understand we're not them, and I don't want us to be them. That's why I'm a Republican. We're not crooks. They're crooks. But we also don't have to be suckers. We don't have to allow them to intimidate us, allow them to con us, allow them to make fools out of us, allow them to shove down our throat a vote that we know is false. Explain to me how your governor certified that vote today.
Fortunately, I can't be
What's
him.
wrong with him?
You want me to say on the
What's
mic
wrong with him?
what I think what's wrong with him?
What's wrong with him?
I
don't know. I have an open mind. I've got an open mind to what's wrong with him. No neutral observer could possibly have signed that. Certainly not a Republican. I mean, he has 200 of his citizens testifying that it's a fraud. The number of votes that they cheated on, I just keep counting them, and that's why I ask. We're well over 100,000. We have acts of fraud that are astounding in America in this day and age. And he hired a voting machine company that's a disgrace. Someone should figure out, what fraud, and uses Venezuelan and Chinese parts, and sends our vote out of the country. And I'd like to know from the governor, did he know that?
I think he
Did he know that our vote was being sent out of the country? Exactly why was our vote being sent out of the country? And if he didn't know it, you got a real serious problem. And if he did know it, he has an even more serious problem. But tell me what's wrong with him. Why can't he just give us an honest, he wouldn't even meet with me. He doesn't want to hear these. It's like, don't show me the facts. Please. Don't show me the 30 or 40 or 50 of my citizens who swear under oath that this happened. So, can you give me any explanation I can bring back to the president?
I think he was, in my personal opinion, I think he was bought and paid for, along with
I didn't expect that answer.
I think that was a rhetorical question. I'll take it for
not a
that.
rhetorical question.
Representative Biasucci.
You're entitled to your opinion, and I will take it into consideration. I did used to do that for a living.
But I also believe that Mr. Shukri, thank you. He knew about all these problems with the Dominion system because
He knew about the problems with Dominion and Smartmatic and...
Oh, absolutely, because I personally sent him a lot of information before he decided to go.
So I assumed, maybe wanting to give them the benefit of the doubt, that maybe they didn't do a good job of vetting the company, because I can't imagine a governor presented, first of all, presented with the notion that any foreign company is going to count our vote. Even an ally is abhorrent. We should count our own vote in the United States.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, to that.
Now you give me a company that's not just Canadian, but sends the ballots to Germany with a connection with a Venezuelan company. All he has to do is go back and read my congresswoman's letter of 2006, in which she says it's not possible to discern the true owners of Smartmatic. The owners are hidden. Smartmatic has been associated with the Venezuelan government led by Hugo Chavez, which is openly hostile to the United States. She concludes, Smartmatic and Bitzer provided the voting machines for 3 frauds. Smartmatic worked with a company called Sequoia. They were thrown out of Chicago. And guess who bought Sequoia? Dominion. All you have to do is you don't have to get Morgan Stanley or Kroll to do this investigation. You just take out your iPad, put in Smartmatic and Dominion, and with a little reading, you get all this. Although some of it now has been, sanitized.
What a surprise.
So you're telling me your governor, see, I just assumed it was a matter of laziness or incompetence and they never got it. You're telling me he knew this?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay.
Please.
Thank you.
Mr. Biasucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Linda, thank you for being here, and I appreciate all you've done, for the party. And something you said that really bothered me to even hear this is even a possibility. But you mentioned that in the duplication room, you saw Trump ballots counting as Biden ballots, Biden votes, right? Trump votes were being counted as Biden votes. Now, I just want to be clear here. I mean, you gave an affidavit, right? This is under oath. This is the truth. You witnessed that happening.
Yes, sir.
In the room.
Once.
More than once. And the explanation from the supervisor was what?
Right. I am not going to listen to this. If you have to be removed from the building, you will be. You're interrupting testimony and questioning. End it. End it. Mr. Biasucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bergman, if you could just repeat that for one more time, and what was the reaction from the supervisor when you asked him that question?
Mr. Chairman, legislators, we reported this ballot default in the screen as a Biden Democratic ballot. We reported this to the supervisors and others in the room, commented that they had witnessed the same manipulation at other times. We were never told what, if any, corrective action was taken. Nothing that I know of had ever been corrected. And as I believe I mentioned right after that, I was yelled at, reprimanded the next day by my own supervisor for causing trouble and bringing up things that I shouldn't have been bringing up.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Senator Allen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Linda, it's so good to see you again, and thank you for hanging in there and doing the work that you're doing. I would like to bring up what the Maricopa County supervisor said in their letter when they certified the Maricopa County vote. They said the Dominion tabulation equipment was vetted by a bipartisan equipment advisory committee before the contract was finalized. The committee tested the functionality and accuracy of the tabulation equipment before it was used in any Arizona election. The Dominion tabulation equipment met mandatory requirements during the accuracy test before the presidential, primary, and general election, and after each of these 2020 elections, the hand count audit shows the machines generated an accurate count. And so it's interesting to hear as you talk about being there as they're testing the machines and all the breakdowns and the problems that went on. Were the supervisors not made aware of the problems that came up when you were doing the audit?
I find it difficult, Mr. Chairman, legislators. I find it difficult that they weren't aware of it, because I was aware of it. I am just a nobody. I'm another voter. And if I was aware of it and I could pass it on to the supervisors as well as the governor's staff as well as other people in power in Arizona Republican Party, I find it difficult that they did not know. Why is it, and let me ask a question if I may, how do we know that the same systems were being used and that the machine wasn't changed and that there weren't problems? We know during the election itself that many of the machines, I believe in almost all locations, were shut down at the exact same time, because while I was working at the elections department, the machines were shut down.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I may, thank you for that. I'd like to follow up on the duplication. How many duplication did you get to see? Because the previous person that gave testimony, I asked this question about my concerns over the duplication thing. Who is there being sure that it's entered into the machine properly and correctly and it's observed? So can you tell me more about that process? How's that done, the duplication process?
Okay. This was only for the general election now, because I worked it also during the primary, so I'm only speaking about it for the general. A machine is put before you, about, I would say this high, this wide. And the actual ballot, the person's ballot, your ballot, sir, could be on the left-hand side. A blank ballot is then placed on the screen, the same screen, and we are to duplicate the votes from the person's ballot over to the right with the intent, and that's the magic word, the intent of the voter. Most of the things that go through the duplication room, not the adjudication room, are because they're soiled or they're damaged. They could be ripped. There could be a number of reasons why it wouldn't go through the tabulation machine. So we had to duplicate it to a clean ballot. My Democratic partner, whom I worked with for quite a while, I worked in there for a good 4 days, probably 8 to 10 hours a day. So we did this on a number of ballots. So you asked me how many ballots. We could get through a ballot in about 15 seconds, so figured out over a 10-hour day, over 3 days, that's how many ballots we could see. When we had a chance to go ahead and start moving all the names from the original ballot over to the sample ballot, some of those ballots were already completed. They were pre-filled out with names. So we had to go ahead and erase all the names on the right-hand side. Could have been Democrat, could have been Republican, could have been independent. We didn't look. We just had to erase all those existing names that were already inputted on those ballots on the duplicated one. We started moving the names over, and we would check each other as a Democrat and Republican to make sure that we were correcting each other. No supervisors, no observers were behind us at all times. The observers, which were very few and far between in that room, never came back to where we were. We were behind the adjudication room. So it was difficult at best to see anything. There was a full wall there. Nobody could see through it, unless you're Superman. We started moving all the names from the actual ballot over to the regular ballot. Again, we had to even move all the ballots if they were 2 for Trump, one that was handwritten, one that wasn't. So it wouldn't be counted at all, because we were told it was an overvote. We had to follow the exact same ballot. When we were ready to push pass through at the very bottom, it was just vote okay. We could see that all of a sudden the ballot was being reverted back to either a Democratic Biden ballot, or, and this didn't happen every time, but more often than not, it was going back to a Democratic ballot, or it would just revert back to whatever names had been on that ballot when we started. So we could never judge whether that ballot was actual, and we didn't have any recourse. We couldn't go back. Once it's in the system, it's in the system.
Once it's in the system, in other words, you couldn't correct it, because once you push the button and it's in the system, and you can't go and say, wait, that's not what I entered.
No, not once it's already through, no. The only other time that we would have an option to be able to see that ballot is at the very end of the day when we would, at each team, would get a whole list of how many ballots they had looked at. We would, if there were any problems with it, we would check on that mimeograph form to see if it was correct or not correct, or if a certain judge was put in or not put in, if, whatever that voter intended. If it still seemed to be a problem where my partner and I didn't agree with the way it came across, we could go to our supervisor, who gentleman's name was Bruce, either Bruce or John. We would go to one of them and ask them, would you please check the machine or check your records to see if these were correct? And we had a number of times that we had to go back in, and they said, yeah, this is the vote that was put in. And it was sometimes correct and sometimes not.
Thank you.
But we couldn't change it at that point.
Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Brickman, I have a question for you, and it's been alleged, and I don't know if, I know that you have had something to do with the whole machine certification and all that. It's been alleged that there were certain machines that were swapped out on the day of the election that were actually not certified. Can you confirm that or dispute that?
I cannot say anything to that. I don't know, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Giuliani, do you have any more questions?
Just a few, because I'm struck by the fact that we're kind of ending where we began.
We still have
Colonel
more witnesses.
Colson, Phil here testified at the very beginning about Dominion, and now Ms. Brickman is telling us pretty much the same things. I didn't realize that you know quite a bit about Dominion.
I'm learning very quickly.
And is it correct that it has an association with Smartmatic?
Yes.
And Smartmatic is a Venezuelan
Yes.
company that was started by Chavez in 2003, 2004 for the purpose of fixing elections.
Yes, sir.
And then Smartmatic worked with a company called Sequoia. I'm trying to simplify this. And Sequoia did an election in Chicago that was, even by Chicago standards, so bad that they fired Sequoia and Smartmatic. Can you imagine how bad it was for Chicago to fire them? And then there was a congressional hearing that's in the record, in the congressional record, from which I read you Carolyn Maloney's letter. All you have to do is read her letter, and it tells you that the company has Venezuelan origins and was invented for the purpose of fixing elections. And then, because you couldn't use the name Sequoia or Smartmatic anymore, Dominion acquired Sequoia, which had all the Smartmatic software and had all the Smartmatic sneaky games and algorithms in it, which also involved Chinese technology. And they started using it under the name Dominion, but would never disclose the history. But you would think that any prudent governor, secretary of state, or commissioner of elections would do the kind of research that you do when you give out a multi-million-dollar contract. I mean, I ran a city, and when I gave out multi-million-dollar contracts, the company was scrubbed very, very carefully. And if this had ever happened to me when I was the mayor, everybody who did it would be fired immediately and investigated. I wouldn't want my city having its votes counted by a Canadian company, much less a company involved with Venezuela. So you are corroborating the facts that our expert witness gave at the very beginning of the hearing, and I really appreciate very, very much your contribution. And also because Dominion has created this problem all over our country. It's not just here in Arizona. You shouldn't feel alone. Our country was victimized by these people in a very, very horrid and disgusting way. And thank you.
Representative Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Linda. I have a couple quick questions for you. First one is, do you think what we're doing here today is useful or a waste of time?
Mr. Chairman, legislators, I think it's very definitely something that we needed to be done. We need to go ahead and take this to you as the legislators, whether we have the governor behind us or not. He's never been behind us and never will be. This is something that you, in your right minds as American citizens, as voters in Arizona, need to do for us. And I
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I believe that, yeah, go ahead. I believe that this is not in vain. Some have called it a dog and pony show. I think that it's showing the public what we're dealing with, and I hope it shows our leaders that we need to look into this further. Are you familiar with the DEF CON conferences that the Maricopa County Recorder has sent staff and himself to on taxpayer money? Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry.
Well, let me read you the results of the 2 years ago. It says, this is the third year we've hosted the Voting Village, and this year we were able to give attendees access to over 100 machines, all of which are currently certified for use in at least one U.S. jurisdiction. The units tested included direct recording electronic voting machines, electronic poll books, ballot marking devices, optical scanners, and hybrid systems. The hackers at DEF CON once again compromised every single machine over the 2.5-day event, many of them with trivial attacks that require no sophistication or special knowledge on the part of the attacker. And I'm going to go ahead further on in the comments. In too many cases, physical ports remain unprotected, passwords remain unset or left in default configurations, and security features of the underlying commercial hardware are left unused or disabled. In addition to showing the security weakness found in the wide variety of election tech on display, the Voting Village's team report shares, and this is important, its strong recommendations for improving election security, most notably the urgent need for paper ballots and rigorous post-election audits. So what we've done here today, I think, is established that we need a rigorous post-election audit. They also go on to recommend that people get the attention of their elected representatives. That's what you guys have done here today. I appreciate that. And so thank you, Adrian Fontes, for bringing this to our attention, that we do need to have rigorous post-election audits and that these machines are not secure. I also want to mention briefly that in Texas, 3 generations ago, that the county supervisors had talked about that these election
bought and paid for by a few people at the top, and that's why it states.
Thank you, Mr. Brickman.
I have 2 quick questions that are not very long at all.
Okay, are these something that's already been covered, or
Any clarification on the write-in ballots? And then I have a question for Mr. Mayor Giuliani that he made a comment during his statement.
all right, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it has to be clear. I'm confused a little bit. You covered it, Mr. Chairman. So when these ballots were there, if there was a ballot, because here's the problem. Republicans won the state of Arizona except for the 2 big offices. All the supervisors were voted in. Fontes lost. I mean, Republicans, the legislature remained in control. So that all happened. But what you mentioned was that if a check mark was for President Trump and then a write-in candidate, even if it said Trump, that ballot wasn't counted?
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I think needs to be clear. Thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, Mayor, did I hear you correctly that says, and you haven't said it at all today, did you ask to meet with our governor, Doug Ducey, and he declined to meet with you?
Yes, sir. I texted him yesterday, the day before yesterday. I explained to him I was coming here. I explained why, and he never responded.
He did not even respond, sir?
I explained to him I'm the president's lawyer, and I'd like to have the courtesy of meeting with you.
Mr. Chairman, Mayor, you were mayor of one of, if not the largest city on the East Coast as a Republican, and which has more people in that city than this state. And I think out of common courtesy and being on the same team, I apologize on behalf of whoever if they dropped the ball not responding to you.
I mean, I've been doing this kind of investigation for 50 years, and when people don't want to meet with me to hear the facts,
right,
I can kind of figure out why they're doing it.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for being here, sir.
All right. We have our last witness, Mr. Mark Lowe. Are you in the building, or have you gone home? Senator Gowan. Hold on, Ms. Brickman. Not done yet, I guess. Mr. Gowan.
Hello, Linda. Are we there? Hello, Linda. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just one question. That's it. I want. Sounds like you're verifying what the Colonel spoke about earlier. When I saw in your first issue here, where signatures were for verification and the standards, you were saying at first they were high, and then they continued to get lower and lower standards, and then finally there were no standards. And I heard a couple others who were earlier saying there was like chicken scratch, but they were just saying, let's get through that.
That's correct, because we were told by our supervisors in the room that too many rejections of ballots had been thrown back because of not being able to verify. Thank you. Verify the signature, that it didn't match the original ballot or the original signature when the person registered to vote. So they said, speed it up.
So they directly told you that. So there in your opinion, there are ballots out there that were counted as a vote that the signature was not verified on an early ballot.
Or there was no signature at all on the outside of the ballot. It was just a scribble, or some people signed with a heart. It was not a valid signature.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, we're done? Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Mrs. Brickman. All right, we have one more witness, and that is Mark Lowe. Once Mr. Lowe is complete, Mr. Giuliani, I'd like you to wrap us up with your closing comments, and then each member will have an opportunity to I guess I'm overruled. There are 4 more people on the list that are still here. Oh, all right. I had called names and nobody stepped forward, so okay. Mr. Lowe, please give your name and what you do, and we're happy to take your testimony.
Distinguished legislators, my name is Mark Lowe. I'm a Maricopa County resident for 30 years, a Southern California refugee.